back with the second episode. I know it's over 2 weeks since the last episode, but I think for me and my personal brand, not brand. I fucking hate using that word. I guess like for my personal thing, this project, I guess I want to make it, my style. Like I don't like rigid deadlines. I don't like I want to do it in a way that feels comfortable to me. So I don't know if it's going to be an every week type thing. It's just going to be kind of like if a topic interests me and it's current and I want to do like kind of like the historical analysis of it. I think that's like kind of like what I think this show kind of is more. It's more kind of a historical materialist show that it's hard to say that because it's just one episode and the history was literally my life. But I guess like in this coming episode, I'm going to be doing the same thing. So I kind of like have to renege on a promise that I just made. I don't think this is going to be an every week thing. I might still do a regular thing, but that might be more streaming and, more casual. It's only because like, sometimes the topics, like with this one, it took me a long ass time to research and compile all this information because I'm doing all this other stuff as well. So that's just kind of like, I think going forward, and like that's why I don't really want to have like a tagline or I do have like joke tagline, right? Like the Yellow Knight, like the Dark Knight, the hero. We don't deserve, whatever. I make a parody of it, the silent troll, the watchful, whatever. But I kind of like just want to make this a little bit more casual, because I do like that. In the first episode, I did kind of like this more off the cuff, but still like a storytelling. And so that's kind of like what I imagine the format going forward. Who knows? I might change it. But I guess like for now, it's going to be just about like topics that are somewhat current, but I want to go back to the history of it because So without further ado, this is the second episode of the Tiger Cave series. And I am going to talk about the CIA and the Obama administration and all this other stuff. So, let's get into it. All right, so we've all seen kind of like the USAID revelations of the past, few weeks after DOGE kind of cut all. I think it was like a freeze of all government funding for foreign aid for 90 days. Just, I guess, like the idea was so they could get a handle on who was spent or where the money was going, right? And so when the freeze happened, that's when it was revealed that all this USAID stuff started to come to the surface of like, hey, we're not getting paid or whatever, blah, blah, blah. And so, but then when people looked more into who wasn't getting paid and who, what people were doing, then like people were like, what the hell is this? And so, it was just kind of like a lot of random woke stuff, all over the world, in the global South. And, stuff that, if you're like a poor person in a global South country, you are not going to give a fuck about transgender ideology. It's like, let's be fucking real. And some of these countries are heavily conservative, like they're Catholic, and or the stuff that imperialists first gave them. I'll talk about that too. And now they're telling them, oh no, you got it wrong by believing in this thing we told you to believe in. Now you got to believe in this crazy other thing we're telling you to believe in, or you're not, progressive, and we have to go and invade your country to make you progressive again. That's basically what's the purpose of this USAID woke shit. So I want to zoom out and tell you a story about a boy named Barack Obama. I think a lot of times the Republicans, when they critique Obama, they use stupid like racist tropes and dumb ass things, which actually gives Obama kind of like a protective shield. It's actually like when they say that to him, now Obama can point out any critic and group them in with that the Republicans and say, oh, you're just a racist bigot, or you're, blah, 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 blah. And so that's how Obama kind of has this shield around him, because the Republicans, like idiots, they go after him, but like for stupid reasons that are not anywhere grounded in reality. So I want to tell you about the actual story that was going on. And yeah, let's get into it. So yeah, since the beginning of international relations, embassies have been used to spy on other foreign nations. I think like England started this practice back when they started opening embassies to their other colonies and nations and all this other stuff. So in the same kind of vein, the USAID program was created in 1961 by the Kennedy administration, and this was like in the thick of the Cold War. Like there was the Bay of Pigs in Cuba. This was after the 1950s, where Dulles and Eisenhower destroyed all over Central, South America and all this other stuff, and but I think the Americans, they realized that you can't just like bulldoze everything and expect everyone to be like, oh yeah, capitalism is the right way to go. So the Democrats, when they're installed in, when JFK wins in 1960, they realized this, and they're just kind of like, all right, we gotta make up a program that sounds more, helpful to these nations, rather than just saying like, you better listen to our military or we're gonna like coup you or destroy you. So it's kind of like a reversal of like the CIA is like now shifting to more of a different strategy now that like they've kind of bulldozed some of those countries that I mentioned before, or regions I've mentioned before. And so this is kind of like a new form of propaganda where they form these aid institutions in different countries, but in actuality these aid workers are literally probably CIA. And so Obama, let's go back into his past. So Obama was born in Hawaii, right? But before that, we talk about that. Let's talk about Obama's father. So Barack Obama Sr. was actually a Kenyan intellectual who was part of a CIA program, or it's speculated that he was part of a CIA program to train Africans to counter Soviet influence in Africa. And this part is true, that he was a Kenyan intellectual, and there was, subversion in Africa. Like CIA wanted to counter, because Soviets were telling the Africans like, hey, the capitalists are exploiting you, blah, blah, blah. And, that's true. And so the Americans were like, hey, we need to recruit some of these people to tell them, capitalism is great and everything. So Barack Obama's father ostensibly was one of these people, because he was a Kenyan intellectual who studied at the University of Hawaii, which was also kind of known as somewhat of a CIA front for operations in the Asian Pacific region. So he actually meets Ann Dunham so Ann Dunham is Barack Obama's mother. So they meet at the same place in the University of Hawaii at a Russian language class. This is another hint, right? Like, why are people in University of Hawaii learning Russian, especially like a Kenyan intellectual, right? Like, why is a Kenyan intellectual trying to learn Russian? Why is this random white lady trying to learn Russian? I mean, maybe they like Dostoevsky a lot, I guess, or who knows, right? So then another kind of like weird fact is that Dunham actually shares an ancestor with the Bush family, Samuel Hinckley. Like, this is all the way back in the 1700s or something. So it's not like a smoking gun or anything like that, but it is kind of like just a weird, interesting fact. Anyway, Obama's maternal grandmother, so Ann Dunham's mother, Madeline Dunham, was vice president at the Bank of Hawaii, which was also speculated to be a CIA front because it was making it was reported that it was making escrow payments to like U.S. supported dictators in Asia, like Ferdinand Marcos and I forgot who the other one. I think Suharto in Indonesia was listed as well, but it was reported that, like, payments to these dictators were being made out of the Bank of Hawaii, and it makes sense. It's like right there, right? And this is way back in the 60s, where you don't have, like, I guess you might have had wire transfers, but I think it's easier. Like, proximity made it easier, right? And so in 1964, so I think he was born kind of like 1961, something like that. So Barack Obama is born 1961-ish, I think. Coincidentally, like right when USAID, that's just a coincidence. Like right when USAID is born, is created. I'm not suggesting that the CIA created Barack Obama out of a lab. So that's not what I'm getting at. But yeah, so what happens next? So in 1964, the Obamas divorce, actually, and Dunham meets Lolo Seotoro, another person who's studying at this University of Hawaii, and they marry in 1965. However, Seotoro is Javanese, which means he's from Indonesia. So he returns to Jakarta, Indonesia, while Dunham is finishing up her BA in anthropology. And so he's going there in 65. But then a curious incident happens. I don't know how much, if you've read the Jakarta Method, but millions of people were killed during kind of like a fascist coup in Indonesia during that exact time. So it's kind of like assumed that he was probably also a CIA asset as well. And so finally Dunham graduates, and moves to Hawaii, Indonesia with Barack Obama. And I think he spends like 4 or 5 years there or something like that. I think he was like ages 6 to 10. And he talks a lot about this, I think, in one of his biographies as well. Obviously, he's leaving out the details about the Indonesian genocide and probably his parents' connections to all that stuff. But yeah, Dunham was also a USAID worker. So that's probably she was also probably CIA. So we have, Obama had a probable CIA father, a CIA mother, a CIA stepfather, a CIA grandmother. So you can see kind of like the CIA and all of this stuff. Okay, just keep that all in mind. All right, so let's go back to so I guess like the other kind of strange thing I found out is that all three of those people, the father, the mother, and the stepfather, they actually all die before the age of 52. Barack Obama Sr. dies in a fatal car accident in 48. Lolo Seotoro dies of liver failure at the age of 52, and Dunham dies of uterine cancer at the age of 52. I'm not saying that any one of these on its own isn't a a crazy thing, but it's just kind of like, yeah, back then 52 was still young to die, and so just a lot of strange shit going on. That's all I say. So around the time Barack Obama Sr. dies is in 1982. 1983, Barack Obama graduates from Columbia University, I believe, or I think either Columbia or Occidental. I forget which one. But then he works for a company called Business International Corporation. Now that sounds like IBM, like International Business Machines, but it's not. It's Business International Corporation, BIC, which is later revealed to be a CIA front after it was acquired in 1986. So while Barack Obama is working there, it is a CIA front. Okay, just keep that in mind too. Okay, so he works there very briefly, and then immediately pivots into grassroots organizing. Like, that's a kind of a strange shift, right? You're in this business CIA thing, and then now you're grassroots organizing. You're part of the people. You're part of the working class, I guess. And so in 1985, he works for 3 months at the New York Public Interest Research Group, where he was a project coordinator. So this is ostensibly where he's kind of like gaining skills in organizing and, you know, talking with people and stuff like that. So then after that, he moves to Chicago to work in the Developing Communities Project for 3 years. So he's doing the same kind of thing. He's it's almost like he's doing the same thing his mother is doing, like this USAID stuff that on the surface looks like he's helping people, but really he's collecting information, gathering data, and like, you know, thinking about his political career. So it's kind of like already pretty apparent that, you know, he's not really doing this out of the goodness of his heart per se, but like even throwing aside all the CIA stuff, like a layman could see that he's not really like, you know, a person of the people. He's more kind of like, how can I get people to think I'm a person of the people so I can, you know, use that as more influence later on. And we'll see that. So then Obama was also during this time a consultant and instructor at the Gamaliel Foundation. I don't know if I'm saying that right. But initially, this foundation was actually an economic organization meant to help Black Americans find housing in Chicago in 1968. But in 1986, you know, this is like way in the Cold War where like the Soviet Union is crumbling. Like 68 is like when, you know, it looks like, you know, it's a toss-up kind of still because like the Vietnam War is going on and all this stuff is happening. And that's what's causing a lot of social upheaval in America. So in 68, they create this thing to help Black Americans find housing. But in 86, it's actually repurposed by this Gregory Galuzzo as a radical social justice agitprop training center. So Galuzzo was actually supposedly a mentor to Obama. He teached him how to organize and meet with him weekly for a year in 1985. And Obama was one of the first instructors for the foundation. So why that's significant is that like you have someone who literally changes this organization from a working class Black American institution, and you kind of like change it into this like, how do we make leftist propaganda foundation? And so, you know, this is how Galuzzo was he literally, there are articles that say I was a mentor to Obama, and that's acknowledged as well. So he says, Galuzzo says he really embraced the community and the community embraced him. I think it was one of the most formative moments in his life where he became proud of his own ancestry because people made him proud. I saw on occasions just talk to very low income people and they would feel wonderful talking to him. They never felt put down. They felt affirmed. So here you have him kind of saying he's good. He learned the tricks. He learned the methods. He knows how to talk to the poor and make them feel that like they're heard. Make them feel like they're heard. That's the key here, because make them actually be heard is a different matter altogether, politically, as we all know. And so that's also interesting because the foundation I talked about got money from the EPA. I have it here. And guess what they got the money from the EPA for? This is coming out of the same sort of the freeze thing. This is not part of the USAID, but this is part of the EPA that gave money to the Gamaliel Foundation. The recipient will develop and pilot climate action hubs in each of the 4 metropolitan regions where they have affiliate organizations. Each community has been harmed by decades of environmental racism. Environmental racism. That's what they got $500,000 for in 2020 something. I don't know. So you can already see that this turned into this foundation went from a thing that was helping housing for Black Americans to this fucking bullshit thing that's literally a fucking grift. That is getting money from the EPA for bullshit reasons. So yeah, that's a bullshit kind of organization as well. So then back to Obama, he enters Harvard Law School in 1988. He meets Michelle during a summer internship at a mega corporate law firm in Chicago, Sidley Austin. The Sidley Austin is the name of the firm. And that's also kind of, like, remember how he went from like this business kind of like facing thing that was a CIA front to grassroots, and now he's going to law school, and now he's going back into corporate law. And then, I think his second summer for law school, he did a clerk. I think he clerked at a progressive firm. So it's just kind of like we're seeing, Obama also like kind of play both sides of the bourgeoisie and the poor, right? Or not the poor, but I guess the working class or whatever. And so what also is significant during this time is in 1990, Obama is actually elected the first black president of the Harvard Law Review. And this actually makes national headlines. So I think Obama is around 28, 29 at this point. And so this was a huge thing. This was basically like the equivalent of 2008 back then, because 18 years of progress or whatever. Well, maybe not that big of a deal, but, I guess like within the bourgeois academia crowd, that was a big deal, right? So he graduates magna cum laude in 1981, and he starts his career as a professor at the University of Chicago Law School while working on his first book, Dreams from My Father. So it even says in the wiki page, I'm not even like making this up, but it says that he writes this book, this memoir, with the intention of using it to launch his political career. So think about that, right? You're thinking about Dreams from My Father. What does that mean, right? I haven't read the book myself, but I know it is about, both of his fathers, like his biological father, Barack Obama Sr., Kenyan intellectual, and the other guy, I forgot what his name, Lolo Seotoro or whatever, something like that. The other guy who was teaching him about how the world worked, working as a CIA agent in Indonesia. And so he releases this book in 1995, right? And this memoir is meant to introduce himself. He's starting his career in the Illinois Senate. The biography itself comes out to positive reviews, right? Mostly positive reviews. But historian critics note that much of the book actually seems fictional. There's anachronisms, there's false interpretations of the events that was going on in Indonesia at the time. And so, you can kind of see like Obama's kind of playing with the narrative here already with his own political career. His own political career is kind of like steeped in a lie from the fucking get-go. And he just kind of like acknowledges like so this actually doesn't make that much of an impact when it comes out in 95. But when he, runs for, I think, senator in 2004, that's when he gets a lot more attention. And that's when people are reading this thing and more people are like, wait a second, a lot of this doesn't kind of like seem accurate here. He acknowledges these changes, but, he kind of hand waves that all those concerns is saying like, look, I was just using, it's creative license, memoirs are art. And, sometimes you got to just, and so what's funny is that like, it's not actually that well received, but in 2008, when he's running for president, all the liberal media is fawning over how it's a masterpiece and kind of like going along with the same line. Yeah, it might not be true, some of it, but he's an artist. And so he knows, he's doing the artistic thing and giving him all this fucking praise for that shit. While, actual scrutiny from historians call it historical fiction because that's what it is. It's just fiction. So he's also, like I said, he's straddling both lines again. Like he was professor at the University of Chicago, which is like a prestigious thing, but he's also on the board for several NGOs in the Chicago area from 94 to 2002. Oh yeah. Another funny note of the book, The Dreams from My Father. So he talks about Michelle Obama and stuff in his past as well. There's a girl named Sheila Miyoshi Jager, a former girlfriend of Obama's, who's half white, half Asian. But in the book, Obama puts her as white, like just white. And so she actually protests against the book because she's like, I'm not just white. I'm half Asian. And I just found this hilarious because of, I mean, you know why I find it hilarious, but it's like applications of the theory I never even expected to be true, but just end up being true. It's just there. The theory is just too, like, it's exceeded my expectation. Anyway, sorry for that aside. Let's get back into it. So Obama is elected to the Illinois Senate in 96, 98. He loses to Bobby Rush because he runs for the primary for the House of Representatives. And Bobby Rush is actually, he was, I don't know if he lost to him primary or if he lost to him in the general. I think he lost in the primary, Democratic primary. So Bobby Rush was a long-time senator for Illinois. I think he was also black as well, and he had won instead of Barack Obama in 2000. So he was House rep, not a senator. So Barack Obama ran for House rep in 2000 and lost to this guy who had been in the seat for a long ass time. So it wasn't too bad of a defeat because, like, you know, whatever. And then so in 2002, he rejoins the Illinois Senate again. And then in 2003, he actually declares that he's running for senator in 2003, using the moment, curiously enough, to lead anti-Iraq war protests. So now he's painting himself as this anti-imperialist, right? Like this military guy, be like, we got to stop the Iraq war. You know, you guys are, this is an unjust war. He's actually like on the podium, like using this as a flashpoint to be like, hey, look how progressive I am. Look how much I care about people abroad that the Republicans are killing, not the Democrats. It's all the Republicans' fault. Like they're going ham on these Iraqis like unnecessarily. And so, the Democrats are needed to pull them back and make them more reasonable. And, so then he's using this in his campaign in 2003. And he wins the Democratic primaries in a landslide in March of 2004, actually. And immediately he becomes a star of the Democratic Party in 2004, not 2008, 2004. And he delivers a keynote address at the 2004 convention. What happened? And while also issuing a re-release of his memoir. So that's when everyone's like, oh yeah, Barack Obama, he's the GOAT, blah, blah, blah. So then the incumbent senator, this is also kind of like a strange thing that's going on here. The incumbent senator is actually a Republican. So his name is Peter Fitzgerald. He's a Republican senator. This is kind of like a little bit strange because he's the first Republican senator in Illinois since 1985. So for, I think, like 10 years or so, or maybe even 15 years or something like that, there was no Republican senator until him. And so he actually during his term, this is before, Barack Obama runs for senator, during his actual term, he's actually exposing corruption within the Republican Party. And so the Republican Party strike back at him and said, we're not going to endorse you for the election. So then Fitzgerald decides to retire because he's not getting support or whatever. So that leaves the seat open for that senator seat to usually you want to run with your incumbent, right, in a party because like they already have the cachet. Incumbents win a lot of the times, and you already have an advantage with your incumbent. But for them to like push away an incumbent is pretty significant. And so what also kind of happens is that their new candidate is a black Republican to I guess like ostensibly compete with Obama. With the I guess they even recognize that, yeah, you gotta fight a black guy with another black guy, I guess maybe. But he is embroiled with another scandal, and he drops out in June. And then I think they have one last candidate that comes in, but he's coming in like, literally just months before the election. And so Obama actually wins by a significant margin. Like, this is like it's like he almost couldn't lose because of all this chicanery. Like, this is a seat that the Republicans had an incumbent in, and Obama wins 70% of the vote in Illinois for that seat, winning by a record margin for a senator in that state. So he wins by a record margin due to all this kind of strange stuff that's going on with the Republicans. Okay. So then, as senator, Obama immediately introduces two initiatives. One is called the Lugar-Obama, which is a continuation of non-Lugar cooperative threat reduction, which is programmed to denuclearize Soviet satellite states to manage the fall of the Soviet Union. So what that is that, when the Soviet Union was falling, there were nukes, Soviet nukes all around, the eastern kind of like European regions as well, Ukraine, for example. And so they kind of had to slowly, denuclearize or like transport the nukes back to Russian territory or whatever to make sure none of those nukes fell into bad terrorist hands. So this was kind of like an extension of that, but it was just kind of more of conventional weapons rather than nuclear weapons. And it's just kind of like, I guess it was kind of strange because like he's running as a senator, ostensibly to attack the Iraq war and do all this stuff. But then the first thing he works on is this kind of like more Soviet containment policy that I was just like, all right, I guess. And then he also, his next initiative was called the Federal Funding Accountability and Transparency Act, ironically enough. And working with Republican senators to extend it into the Strengthening Transparency and Accountability Federal Spending Act of 2008. So that's an interesting kind of thing where he teams up with some Republicans to find where the money's going back in 2006. All the way back then, it seems interesting that the roles have somewhat been reversed. But yeah, another interesting fact. He also co-sponsors the Republican-created Secure America and Orderly Immigration Act. It never actually goes to vote, so it doesn't, most people don't know about it. But he did sponsor this Secure America and Orderly Immigration Act in 2008. So we all know what that means, right? Like, let's be fucking real. That's all the border crisis shit. Let's be fucking real. Then he sponsors the Iran Sanctions Enabling Act, which actually wasn't enabled during his term as senator, but later on it becomes the Comprehensive Iran Sanctions Accountability and Divestment Act of 2010, which he approves as president. So this is basically like, installing your woke liberals into Iran and sanctioning them while using these woke Iranian feminist liberals to talk shit about Iran. So that's basically what the start of that kind of grift. Interestingly, he becomes the chairman of the Senate's Subcommittee of European Affairs. Then he sponsors the Iran Sanctions Enabling Act, which was not enabled, but incorporated later on in the Comprehensive Iran Sanctions Accountability and Divestment Act of 2010, which he approves as president. And this is all, we know what this is. This is like, installation of like the woke feminists, the Iranian feminists who claim that Iran is this terrible place for women. And while they sanction Iran and they do all this shit to kind of like pressure them, same stuff that they do to North Korea and China and Vietnam and all that stuff. So we all know that bullshit that he's doing there. And then interestingly enough, he becomes the chairman of the Senate Subcommittee on European Affairs and also a member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, where he would make trips all over Eastern Europe, the Middle East, Central Asia, and Africa. Why this is significant is these are all former Cold War hotspots. So he's like checking up on all these places. And it's just kind of like, wait, you told us you were, this progressive, senator working for working class people and, going to stop the war in Iraq or, try to reverse that or, running against that. But now you're going to all these Cold War spots and all of a sudden you're the chairman of the subcommittee on European affairs. Like, when did you talk about Europe at all? Like, how did you become the, you know, the person for all this stuff, right? This is very interesting information that I'm finding here. Okay, so Obama announces his presidency at the old Capitol building in Illinois in 2007. And the reason why this is significant is it's symbolic. It's Lincoln. This is where Lincoln gave his House Divided speech. He wins a close contest against Senator Hillary Clinton in the Democratic primaries because, Hillary Clinton was actually, I think she was the senator of New York at the time. And she sets numerous campaign contribution records. So creating campaign strategies, taking advantage of new social media platforms to reach young voters, reaching an all-time high voters of under 30 as a percentage of the overall vote. So yeah, a lot of us millennials voted for Obama. Actually, it's funny because when I was in acting school, that's when we found out that Obama had won. And I had been pretty apolitical up to that point, and I knew that everyone was like, oh yeah, like everyone was like it felt like everyone thought the second coming of Christ had come. And I remember just thinking like, I never heard of this guy, like, until very, very recently. Like, how do I know that this guy is even legit? Like, I remember thinking that all the way back in 2008, right? Like, this guy, who is he? Like, he came out of nowhere, and what, now he's the savior of America, I guess? Okay, well, let's see what happens. I actually didn't vote until 2020, so that's how apolitical I was. Anyway, he's elected president, obviously. And so this is a president who was brought presumptively under the guise of being a grassroots political organizer for the working class, yet when federal office, he consistently focused on imperialist causes, while making the conscious choice of, creating a fictional backstory for himself and marrying Michelle for his political career, because like before Michelle, it was a string of white women, and he decided, combo breaker, I got to date Michelle so I can be legitimate in front of like African American voters. Like literally this is something that he actually admitted. Okay, and so if he's already admitting that he's doing specific things just for votes, like what else is he doing for votes? Like, come on. And then so this starts to for me, it starts to paint a different picture of yes, we can. He uses the backdrop of an anti-communist genocide caused by the CIA as a coming-of-age story for his political career to make him more endearing to voters. And we haven't even gotten to his record yet. Okay. All right. So then let's shift gears from Obama to the financial crisis, because I think that's like kind of like the cocktail of causes that caused this like woke era to begin even in the first place. So the financial crisis to me was almost kind of like the Great Depression, but deferred. What I mean by that is back when the first Great Depression happened, they didn't have a lot of these kind of, I guess, controls or I don't want to say controls. They didn't have like the financial instruments that the Federal Reserve has today to deploy capital as efficiently as effectively to save, the economy, quote unquote. We have much more, I guess, options. But to me, what that is just like kicking the can down the road. It's without going into too much of the financial engineering mumbo jumbo, it's kind of like, for the longest time, the petrodollar has been the strongest because like the U.S. military is backing it. And so people were trading with the petrodollar. And so if you had to pay with dollars, you demand dollars. So there was always a demand for dollars that keeps the price of dollars up. But I think, especially in the past 20, 30 years, I think our government has kind of been complacent with that and thinks, hey, the money train is going to last forever. Kind of like, what happened in 2008 with the banks. It was just kind of like in 2008, they were well, I'll get into that, but like it was the same kind of deal where they were making all these loans that were riskier and riskier, but because, real estate never went down, they were like, hey, real estate's never going down, so we're just going to print money. Same thing with America. It's just kind of like, the dollar will never go down, so we can just print money, literally. They just press a button, and Ben Bernanke just generates all that quantitative easing for us. So yeah, so that's why we avoided an actual depression, but we did have a significant recession for around like 3 or 4 years that affected a lot of Americans. And so yeah, let's get into it. It was the first Great Depression. It was buoyed by American success after World War I. So World War I, obviously was not fought on American soil. So all of Europe is actually devastated. Like most of the battles were in France and Germany, and so a lot of that territory is fucking fucked up. And not only that, manpower. England and Russia lose a shit ton of manpower. I mean, Russia's obviously communist at this point, but England is losing a lot of of their workforce, right? Like men who fought in the war and died. And so, like the only place that was kind of like still humming was America. And so they became kind of like the global leaders in finance at that point, or they kind of like took the reins from England at that point. England still had its colonies, but America was industrializing and becoming, more of an industrial power, due to its size, its resources, and yeah, like I said before, it was not affected by the war. And not only that, during this time, the Roaring Twenties, the electricity was kind of like becoming more mainstream. Electricity started being researched, late 1800s, more kind of in earnest. And by the 1920s, you had appliances, right? Like actual appliances that used electricity that was becoming popular. And as a result, people were like, oh shit, like appliances, electricity, like the future is here. Let's spend money on these stocks that are going to give us these crazy appliances from the future. And we're going to love life because, electricity is making everything better. Electricity is helping Henry Ford make all these cars faster. Electricity is making everyone's life great. And so this kind of mirrors the financial crisis, because there was, in a similar kind of way, not this current tech boom or whatever, like in the 2010s, but back in the 1990s, this is where Bezos, Musk, Cuban, Andreessen, all those guys, Gen X guys, they cut their teeth during this time. They made their initial splash in the industry during the 1990s, because like the internet was the new electricity, if that makes sense. It was like, oh shit, the internet's going to change everything, and people are going to buy things on the internet and blah blah blah, whatever, blah. And so a lot of that ended up being true, right? Just like electricity ended up being a lot of in a lot of our lives, obviously. And so the internet is also part of lives. But I think people got so crazy with it. They threw money at every .com that was, that just like, like dogs.com, cats.com, like .coms were just getting valuations just on name alone. There was no product, there was no execution. It was just like people were just throwing money at domain names. So this is like the wild fucking West. And by 1999, there's kind of like this bubble, and it's called the .com boom, where in 2000 the bubble bursts and the stock market kind of like melts. It crashed again, but not as significantly as the Great Depression. So this was actually not the big shock, but it did cause a lot of stuff in the economic conditions later on. So Alan Greenspan, who's the chairman of the Federal Reserve, he cuts the federal fund rate to 1% after the 9/11 thing by 2004 in an effort to save the economy. And so what this does is that like now loaning rates are very low, right? And he never really kind of like, so this encourages a lot of borrowing because like, if interest rates are low, people are going to borrow more. So if they borrow more, they usually use this to buy houses sometimes, or they're more likely to buy houses when the interest rates are low, because it's just like, hey, like interest rates are low. So this demand in houses pushes the housing prices up, right? So, with people buying more and more houses are going up in price. So then this causes a speculative bubble, because other people are saying, like, not even homeowners, but other people who want to make money off this, they're like, hey, wait a second. These houses are rising. They've always risen historically. And so all I need to do is secure a loan to buy one of these houses. And then as it appreciates, I can flip it and just pay off the loan and collect the difference, right? So this is kind of like encourages more and more speculation. And the people, the loan officers, they don't, on the loan side, it's just kind of like, there's this new thing, or not new thing, but in the 1970s, they introduced something called mortgage-backed insurance, or mortgage-backed securities. So what they do is they have a bank make all these loans, right, to different lenders, or different borrowers who want to buy a home, right? Let's say whatever. They put them in a kind of like bucket, and then they ship that bucket to kind of this mortgage-backed securities company that like packages it all together. So it's like the idea is that it minimizes risk, because like, let's say, if you're lending, a certain amount to one lender, there's a chance that lender could go bankrupt and lose their job or something like that, and they can't pay their loan back. And so obviously, if that happens, you're screwed, because you have to take the entire loss. But if you package like 100 loans or 1,000 loans or 1,000,000 loans together, like, yeah, there could be people dropping out and whatever, but they're all the other people will be, paying back their loans on time. And so you kind of like spread out the risk. So that was the idea of mortgage-backed securities. And like, ostensibly, it's kind of like a good logical thing. Like, you never want to put your eggs in one basket. And so that's where that concept comes from, the mortgage-backed securities. But on the loan side, now people are just loaning out, because like, as a loaner or as a lender, I get just commission on every loan. So I don't care about their credit score or whatever, because I get that money. And so like, as time goes on, I want to make more and more loans, because I get more and more money from those loans. And I just ship them off to the mortgage-backed securities company, because like they can handle that risk. And so I'm just like generating loans, collecting the stuff, sending it over to mortgage-backed securities, and I'm just like incentivized to make as many loans as possible. So over time, like the standards for loan, like, FICO score, like your loan to value ratio, all this other stuff, they start going down. And so they start issuing riskier and riskier loans over time. And so this is what really causes this financial crisis, because like now in 2007, we started to see the first defaults on those payments, the first like massive defaults on those payments. So there's starting to be more and more defaults that are building up, and this starts to like cascade into like like the Great Depression a little bit, where like everyone is like fucking freaking out. The banks had to be bailed out. Let's see what happened. So yeah, I talked about that. And so yeah, so by late 2007, real estate market starts to crumble, cascading into major crisis by late 2000s. Yeah. Federal government bails out Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, AIG, Washington Mutual, and uses the Treasury to spend $700 billion to buy up those toxic assets and bank stocks from the bank, because like the bank is taking all these losses. So the federal government is buying those mortgage-backed security things from them, so they can, stay liquid and have enough money to do their other services. And so Obama signs the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, which ends the worst of the recession by mid-2009. However, unemployment reaches 10%. 25 in 2009, 25% of households lost 75% of their net worths. Okay, poverty rate increases from 12.5% to 15.1% in 2010. Europe has their own debt crisis in the 2010s as a result of weaker Eurozone states now running deficits because of the recession in America, because they were basically running deficits on foreign funding. So what they were doing is they were, I forgot what it was, but it was this thing where I think they were using, they were running deficits on American funding. Like they were relying on American foreign funding to run their countries. But then obviously after the financial crisis, America's got to deal with its own shit. So they're kind of like left with the bag, holding the bag and being like, oh, this probably was not a good fiscal policy for our country. And, you know, there's a lot of shit that goes on, you know, in Europe as a result. You know, I'm sure you know about the EU kind of disintegrating at the moment. So the Federal Reserve Chairman at the time, Ben Bernanke, he continues his quantitative easing program, which is basically printing money by pressing a button on a computer. And he buys government bonds, and other securities to stimulate the economy. So he's doing the other side where now he's buying up securities to recharge the economy. Notably, however, the only bank that does face legal consequences in 2008 was the Abacus Federal Savings Bank, a small bank that was run by Chinese Americans founded in 1984. There was a documentary that came out in 2016 called Abacus Small Enough to Jail, if you want to know more about that story. But basically, they were exonerated in 2015, and it was a very clear case of racism, as no other bank faced the aggressive prosecution that they did. And, you know, it's just kind of like the other part was that Abacus's loans, despite, you know, doing some of the same practices, they actually paid on time. Like they didn't have a lot of the loaners that were not paying on time. So even with their, you know, their practices, they were doing fine. They didn't have any of the bailout. So they, A, didn't need a bailout, and B, they were prosecuted for doing what everyone else was doing. But like they actually were, I guess, disciplined enough to find borrowers that didn't still, you know, subvert those rules and restrictions or whatever. And so, yeah, you can watch the documentary to know about more about that. While a major depression is averted, the conditions for the masses do not improve. And so in 2011, there's a movement called Occupy Wall Street. It's a grassroots protest that lasts, you know, like a long time, actually. But in the actual park, it lasts 2 months. But it's like kind of like a year-long kind of protest in Zuccotti Park in downtown New York City. And so this movement was led by grassroots activists. They're more kind of like steeped in more of a Marxist tradition. And they create the slogan called "We are the 99%." They voice their distrust of the financial system and the markets. But they also direct attention to the fact that the bankers themselves were all protected and none of them faced any consequences for their actions. While the government also passed Citizens United in 2010, which gave any corporation nearly unlimited political influence during campaign donations. So I don't know if you know about Citizens United. It was kind of like this weird case with this Republican party that was pointing out the hypocrisy of the Democratic Party being able to use certain things and how they weren't. And so it ended up being that, I guess, corporations are people now, and so they have rights, First Amendment rights, and so they can spend unlimited money on... Corporations can spend unlimited money on political campaigns now. So yeah, that's the result of Citizens United. So for the first time since possibly the 1970s, the phrase anti-capitalist actually was popularized again in the United States. Because for the longest time, you know, after the Cold War, it seemed like, oh yeah, we won. So what is anti-capitalism? Like, you're an idiot. Like, we won. What are you talking about, right? But for the first time in 2011, people are starting to say like anti-capitalist stuff again. And so the Occupy Wall Street, their goals included a reduction in the influence of corporations on politics with the Citizens United thing, more balanced distribution of income, more and better jobs, bank reform, which I think should have been done, definitely, a forgiveness of student loan debt and other relief or for indebted students, alleviation of foreclosure situation, because, that people are losing their homes, right? Like, due to this crisis. Some media labeled the protests anti-capitalist. That's where the anti-capitalist sentiment comes from. And while other disputed the relevance of this label. Huffington Post runs this interesting headline saying, Occupy Wall Street is about who saved capitalism. That's an interesting liberal interpretation. So it's revealed later on that Homeland Security kept tabs on protesters, citing that they were a possible locus of violence. So in 2012, Partnership for Civil Justice found that despite calling it a peaceful protest, there were a dozen FBI field offices that were, concentrating on this. Department of Homeland Security as well, and other federal agencies were monitoring this movement. So it wasn't just this casual reaction from the feds. They were like looking at this shit like hardcore. Because, this movement really probably threatened the ruling class. It was at the source. The Brookings Institute, which is an American think tank, comes out with the analysis of the May Day parade, which happened, I think, in 2011 or 2012, basically. And they report that a third of the marchers were middle class and made over 100K. So they were champagne socialists, and they were just merely greedy and should think about how lucky they are. And that is kind of like an obvious, CIA kind of institute. I think the Brookings Institute, I think everyone pretty much, yeah, just like the name alone, Brookings Institute, come on. All right. So anyway, ever since the fall of the Soviet Union and the rise of neoliberalism, discussions about class would be reduced to identity. So ever since the 1990s, it's always just been about race instead of class. And, it's more been about race than class since the 1960s, but it amps up another level since now the Soviets are defeated. What is the last problem of American society? Oh, we have to tackle racism, right? And so racism in the liberal sphere is very emphasized because it's kind of like the last frontier of progress that America has to achieve before full progress has been made and full equality, equal opportunity has been given to all. And so they focus on these things, in my opinion, because they reduce them to identity because, as if the only problem in American society is due to interpersonal racist relations with each other. But they totally ignore the economic forces that create objectively poor conditions for people that cause this tension to begin with. Because now that communism, like I said, was proven not to work by the Soviet Union falling, the only cause towards social inequity seemed to stem from racial issues alone. Since, of course, America is the land of opportunity and everyone has equal opportunity. But then because these black people are not doing that as well, there has to be some sort of racial problem with it. And while that's definitely true, it doesn't tell the whole story. So that's all I wanted to say about that for now. So Obama at first, when this protest is happening, they sing a nice tune about empathizing with the protesters. But keep in mind, New York City has been run by Democrats for decades. So it is a Democrat city, through and through. Okay. And so when they passed Citizens United, this is all under the Democrats' watch, right? So then they're likely coordinating with the FBI and NYPD to keep tabs on these protesters. They're not friendly with these protesters. Let's make no mistake about this. And while all of this is happening, Obama is busy annihilating children and causing chaos in Libya, Yemen, Syria. He's staging a coup in 2009 in Honduras, installing a far-right dictatorship. He expands NSA mass surveillance. He expanded AFRICOM and military presence in Africa. He allowed gun running to Mexican drug cartels. underfunded the Veterans Association, causing the deaths of U.S. service members. So he's doing all this shit while he's pretending to be like, oh yeah, I'm empathetic with these protesters. It's like, no, you're not. Come on, let's be real. So although the movement is ultimately squelched, it began a discussion of corruption in the financial services industry. And it actually started questioning the essence of capitalism. I think before 2011, I think people didn't even like think about talking about communism because like we already knew that it didn't work because the Soviet Union fell. But then this really started that conversation going back up again. So I think the ruling class was very threatened because they thought they killed the communist beast, and now it's coming back again. So they have to like squelch this shit. So they do squelch it. But then what curiously happened is, as they're squelching it, liberal media is attacking the movement on woke grounds. It's saying, oh, the protests didn't even have black representation. So do we even know that they're, part of the people? That's what the other thing was, the Brookings Institute with the 100K. 100K sounds like a lot, but in New York City, it's actually not that much. Just because the cost of living in New York City is so high, it's just kind of like, back then in 2008, I remember paying like, what is it? I remember paying like $2,500, $3K a month on rent for a 1-bedroom, all the way back in 2008. I want to say, was it? I'm not sure exactly, but the point is, like, it's not cheap to live in New York, as everyone knows. So, like, yes, 100K, 6 figures. That sounds like a lot of money, but in New York City, it's kind of like average. And maybe even less now. I don't know. New York's kind of fucking crazy. I'm not gonna lie. And so they're doing all these things to like attack it on woke grounds, like, oh, it's too white and privileged with these champagne socialists. Oh, it's not enough black people. Even though Harlem is all the way on 125th Street, so it's hard to like get a lot of that cross promotion. So because like Wall Street is all the way downtown, so that's like 6-7 miles away. And what else did they say? They said, they also said an anti-Semitic jab when apparently some of the protests would criticize Zionists and Zionist bankers with being complicit with the system. And so they were like, oh, they're Nazis. They're anti-Semitic, so they made every smear. The liberals smeared them, this more communist related movement with these kind of like identity politics bullshit. Like, oh, they're anti-black, they're anti-Semitic, and they're just a bunch of white champagne socialists. So that's kind of like what they did. And yeah, in the November poll, 33% of Americans, while they did say they supported Occupy Wall Street, 45% did not. So yeah, so the liberals managed to find calling the movement racist or sexist seemed to work to delegitimize it. So I think this was probably the start of wokeism as a policy. So this kind of like planted the seeds of like, hey, we can actually combat this now with this woke ideology, and that works, right? Like all we have to do is say like, oh, it's too white, it's too whatever, and or it's too misogynist, and that'll be the thing that works. Okay, so this is the incubation of wokeonomics now. So in 2012, most of Obama's policies do end up mitigating the worst of the recession. And so he's kind of credited with saving the economy. And although he's, 2012, it's not as enthusiastic as 2008, he does win by a comfortable margin again. Not as much as 2008, of course, but he does win against Mitt Romney, who's this kind of uninspiring guy from San Diego, I believe. He's this Mormon, which I think is also strange because I feel like Republicans running a Mormon was doomed to fail from the get-go, because religion, right? And so in April 11th, 2012, Trayvon Martin was a black unarmed teenager and shot by George Zimmerman, a Hispanic man. So this happens 13 years ago. So when the jury comes out with his non-guilty verdict a year later in 2013, this creates this movement called Black Lives Matter. Alicia Garza, Patrisse Cullors, and Opal Tometi, they originate a hashtag called Black Lives Matter to create a grassroots organization directed towards defunding the police and spreading what I like to call, or what even they like to call, Afro-pessimist ideology. The ideology that black people are fucked no matter what, no matter where they live in the world, and reparations need to be paid to them to fix the situation. That's the essential Afro-pessimist ideology. And so this has its first large movements in 2014. So that's when BLM starts. It's not as big as it is in 2020 yet, but that's when it starts. Black Lives Matter was also, curiously enough, quickly pivoted to promote other liberal identity political causes like LGBTQ activism, feminism, and immigration reform, and creating a natural narrative of privileges versus rights. Like, everything is framed in white privilege, white whatever. It's just kind of like, oh, it's because they're privileged that they, are better than, or doing better than us. It's not because of all these other economic conditions that I don't really want to talk about. I want to flatten it to just, I'm black, they're white, so they have privilege. Yes, I will, yeah. So that's kind of like what happened then. Okay, so then, curiously enough, the Ford Foundation, which is a known CIA front for a long, long time, very, very familiar favorite of George Soros as well, in 2016, they announced a $100 million donation to Black Lives Matter. And so it's just kind of like, all right, we know what's going on here. This is a CIA operation that's happening. All right, so that's the black identity politics that's kind of being incubated at the time. On the other side, in 2014, the DSM-5 was released. And why that's significant is, so DSM-5, actually. So DSM is, I forgot what it stands for, but it's the psychology kind of like handbook of like, this is the way, this is what each syndrome is or whatever, and what the effects are and how to diagnose and blah, blah, blah. So it's kind of like a medical standard of like psychiatry or psychology. Oh, what are those? You get it. But in 2004, when DSM-5 was released, they declared the gender identity disorder to be reclassified to gender dysphoria. So gender identity disorder is basically like when you are trans, or you believe you are a different, gender or whatever. So in DSM-4, it was basically classified as all a mental illness. So in DSM-5, what they do is they classify it to gender dysphoria only if you have distress with it. Like if you're trans, for example, and you're fine with it, you're not gender dysphoria, you are fine. You have no mental illness. Which I think, that makes sense a little bit. But then what they also did was they lowered the threshold which you could actually diagnose somebody with gender dysphoria. So what ends up happening is, all these children start saying, hey, I feel distressed because I feel like I'm being bullied at school for my gender identity. And so what happened after, the DSM-5 was released was that this actually caused a significant debate. This wasn't passed without any, outcry. Like, people were like, this technically lowers the threshold for gender dysphoria, like I said before, which would possibly lead to overdiagnosing children with trans identity, which, they could just be going through an adolescent puberty phase. I mean, we've all gone through puberty. It's awkward as fuck, and that's just how puberty works. And sometimes you do think like, hey, I think like a woman or whatever, blah, blah, blah. But usually, like, obviously maybe not all the time, but usually it's just a phase. Like 99.9% of the time, You know, we humans have gone through puberty for thousands and thousands of years, and we have experiences to back this up. You know, people have strange experiences, you know, becoming an adult. And that's just natural. It's not this thing where, you know, you need to diagnose someone with gender dysmorphia just because they said something. Because, like, what ended up happening is there's this health clinic, or not health clinic, I think this pharmaceutical company called Komodo Health. And from 2017 to 2021, they found a 270% increase in puberty blockers and 166% rise in testosterone prescriptions from kids aged 6 to 17. So this isn't just adults. This is like literal double-digit percent growth year on year for hormone replacement therapy for children. This is why I think like this actually got pushed through, because it's all these pharmaceutical companies like making billions and billions of dollars selling this shit. Okay, and the last thing that happens for the incubation was a Gamergate controversy. So Gamergate controversy was also in the same year, 2014. And this was caused by a blog post by a guy named Aaron Gajoni. I'm probably butchering that. Apparently, he had an ex-girlfriend named Zoe Quinn, who he accused of cheating with multiple men, including a games journalist, for clout in the industry. So this post went viral on Reddit and 4chan. It caused debate about, you know, women's place in games and the game industry. And it was this whole kind of like, what it was is like a bunch of like autistic gamers who are raged at the idea of like, you know, women kind of like stepping into their territory and like being unearned. I think that's the biggest part. I think like a lot of people don't realize that like autistic people in their games, like they take it very seriously. They take it like this is their thing. This is their religion. Like, and so if you like, if they smell even a hint of illegitimacy, you know, we're seeing it with Elon too. Like he kind of like LARPed as this pro gamer, and the Gamergate community or gamers are calling that out too. They're saying that that's bullshit. You're fucking lying. You're not an expert gamer. So they take this gaming stuff very seriously. So they're making they're making all these memes and whatever. They're fighting against like the mainstream media against this about this Gamergate situation. And so this also happens right after the Isla Vista killings of Elliot Rodger, which, you know, also causes an incel movement. And so these movements start to mesh together in 2014, which like both popularizes the incel concept, where these people are actually like calling themselves incels on purpose as like an identity and being like, we need to fight back because we're incels, and we need now that we know that we're incels, we have to fight the system for freedom or whatever, you know, like all this other shit that you know, they make these Pepe memes and they make these all these kind of like right-wing memes. I think they start making the Wojak stuff, and so they're actually legitimate funny memes. Like they're very sharp in pointing out hypocrisy, and they're very sharp in like clowning on kind of like the establishment. And so it's speculated, actually, so around the same time, it's actually speculated that there's this hacker group called Anonymous in 2014. So this hacker group called Anonymous, they do kind of like before 2014, they were this group of hackers, ostensibly, that's what they call themselves, that were trying to highlight progressive issues and like kind of like anti-government, like establishment. You know, this is what the government's doing, and we need to stop it. Like it's very like anti-government, right? It's almost kind of like this anarchist kind of group. They wear the Guy Fawkes mask, or that's their kind of like symbol, which is like, you know, the V for Vendetta thing. So they kind of have more of an anarchist tilt. But it's speculated that around this time, the CIA was able to infiltrate and catch the people of Anonymous, and they took over the Anonymous itself. And so it's speculated that also around this time, the CIA is kind of understanding or starting to understand the power of social media from Gamergate. And so, some of these memes are very insightful and very kind of like they go viral. And so the CIA always wants to know like what's going viral and how to harness that, right? So some speculate that some of these 4chan posters and Reddit posters were actually recruited by the CIA for their work, which is, there's nothing to prove that, but that's what's speculated, because the anonymous thing was speculated because all of a sudden in 2014 they started to make much more, pro-establishment, like, basically Democratic Party like bullshit, and so yeah, they are definitely CIA now, in my opinion, or at least like they're not anonymous is what the point of that is. So then that's the incubation of like woke. Those events like were like that started the whole process of incubating wokeonomics. So you don't want to the CIA is very subtle. You don't want to hit them over the head in the beginning with all this woke shit. You gotta plant the seeds of wokeonomics. And I'm not saying that like the CIA planned all these events either. I'm saying that some of these things, organically happened, like the Black Lives Matter protests and all this other stuff, but some of them, may not have. And so I'm just saying, but in either case, CIA uses those, never let a good crisis go to waste, right? Like, it's able to be opportunistic about certain things if they can use it to shape a certain narrative. And so, yeah, what I'm saying is I don't think all these events were orchestrated by the CIA, but I think the CIA has the opportunity to use them, if that makes sense. Okay. But they might have influenced some of them as well. Who knows, right? So while this is all going on, in late 2013, Ukrainian President Yanukovych, but he was then president of Ukraine, and he rejected an EU association agreement in favor of closer ties to Russia. So he wanted to be closer to Russia, so he says no to this EU association agreement. Afterwards, mass protests were held in Ukraine. This was known as the Euromaidan movement. Violent clashes where 100 people were killed in the chaos. By February 2014, Yanukovych flees to Russia, and an interim government takes over as Ukraine's parliament vote unanimously to remove him. Russia declares a coup in Ukraine and annexes Crimea in response. They also backed pro-Russian Eastern Ukrainian separatists, which starts the Donbas War. So the Donbas War starts because Russia is backing the separatists in the Eastern Ukrainian region, which is much more pro-Russian than the rest of the country. So in a 2013 speech, Victoria Nuland, who's then the Assistant Secretary of State, noted that America had spent $5 billion in democracy-building efforts since 1991 in Ukraine. We all know what that means, right? $5 billion in democracy-building efforts. That's USAID, okay? And there was also a leaked call in February 2014 between Nuland and U.S. Ambassador Jeffrey Piat, discussing who they wanted to install as the next leader of Ukraine. They were debating who they wanted to handpick, and that ended up being Zelensky, obviously, as the next leader of Ukraine. So America financially supports the protesters. And after Ukraine, ousts that guy, they send military aid, during Obama's administration, all the way back in 2014, and which increases to $1.5 billion by 2019. So they start giving lethal aid in 2019. And so, this is when the war is actually going on, right? So they're killing people in the Donbass this entire time. Like civilians and shit. This is what the Azov battalion, they killed 15,000 civilians during this Donbass war or whatever. And so that happens in 2014. This is on Obama's watch as well. So at the end of Obama's term, nobody's really even thinking about this because nobody really, everyone's like, oh, Russia bad, Putin bad. So of course they're bad. So no one's really looking that deep into it other than Putin bad, right? So at the end of Obama's second term, it almost seems like, you know, especially after George Bush's kind of like terms, you know, Bush is seen as kind of like a clown president and kind of like an idiot. You know, even pre-Trump. So he was like the Trump before Trump a little bit, where he was mocked. His you know, people thought he was just an idiot that turned into bad presidency. So in contrast with this, it seems like Barack Obama is like the new kind of like the new progressive guy who stabilized a financial crisis, who you dealt with the Middle East, like, you know, like he wasn't soft on them. He was hard on the, you know, the Middle Eastern terrorists. And so he's protecting America is the idea. And so some people declare that like he's like one of the best presidents of all time. And so like, yeah, this is basically what's the rhetoric it's like in 2016. And I remember thinking actually in 2016, I was like, I don't know how the Republicans are ever going to win again. Like that, I remember thinking that. And keep in mind, I was very apolitical at the time. I didn't have a dog in either of the fight. But that's actually what I thought. I was like, yeah, it just seems like Democrats are crushing. And they're more logical and more whatever. So it's like, yeah, it almost seemed like a 2016 election was just going to coronate the next Democrat, which, you know, as we all know, they wanted to be Hillary Clinton. Okay, so then, of course, not that I'm saying that this was planned either, but just an opportunity thing. But wokeism found its perfect foil. Okay. You know, I've been reading a lot of Friedrich Nietzsche recently, and one of his ideas that I liked was that for an individual to become the best version of himself, he kind of also needs a proper opponent to bring out the best of himself. And so this comes out in like sports, right? Like if you want to get good at tennis, right? You don't want to play against like a player who's like doesn't even know what he's doing or like whatever, because like, yeah, you can beat him, but you're not going to get better. You want to play someone like optimally, you want to play someone who's a little bit better than you. So like you can kind of like, you know, play against them and hold your own, but you're also kind of learning like his style and being like, okay, like this is what he's doing. And you kind of like learn through experience and repetition. And so that's how you get stronger, right? And so that's an idea I like from Nietzsche. But I think it also applies here with woke. For woke to get stronger, you need an opponent to like attack wokeism, so then wokeism can figure out what the attacks are and build counters to them and, you know, become even stronger, because now it becomes like this bigger thing. And I think for me, at least, it's in my opinion, for the wokeonomists, Donald Trump was the perfect foil to like build their woke monster machine. Okay, so I mean, you guys all know this, but I just want to get it out there for posterity, right? So ever since Obama was elected, Trump brought up the birther conspiracy theory, you know, saying that Obama was actually born in Kenya and that the birth certificate was fake. And this was actually during I think it was 2004 or 2008. Like that's when Trump was it was like a significant conspiracy theory, I guess, on the right. I think basically when 2008 happened, and you know he was the main contender, right? So they got to smear him with whatever. So that was when the birther so Trump contributed to the birther controversy. Sorry, I don't know why I turned English. So then, you know, Obama remembers all this. And so in 2011, at the White House Correspondents' Dinner, Obama humiliates Trump for 3 minutes, okay, during his speech as retaliation. And this starts in Trump's mind to become president himself. You could see it on his face. You could see what his actions afterwards. And, it's all kind of like everyone agrees that like this was the pivotal moment where Trump was like, I'm going to be president. And not only going to be president, I'm going to shut down everything you did and show the Democrats how full of shit they are. That's basically, what was happening in Trump's mind, in my opinion. In that I'm going to show the world how corrupt these Democrats are, how full of shit, how fake they are. So then, because in 2004, he's actually a Democrat. So so what happened is in 1988, he declared himself a candidate. No, sorry. He considered running for president since the 88 election. So after Reagan gets elected, I guess, he's like, hey, maybe I should be president one day. And so in 99, he does declare himself a candidate for the Republican Party, but withdraws in 2000. So he was going to run, I guess, in the Bush, what was it? Who was in Al Gore, right? Bush, Al Gore. He was going to probably run against Bush in the primaries, but he withdrew in 2000. So in 2004, actually, he identifies as a Democrat, but after the speech in 2011, he becomes non-party affiliated. So immediately we can see that he does not want to be associated with Democrats at all because of the speech, and then registers as a Republican in 2012. So already he's making moves like a year later. And so in 2013, it's reported that he spent money to research his viability as a candidate for 2016 presidential run. So he's spending money and finding out like feelers, putting out feelers to see if he has a shot. So in 2015, he actually doesn't renew his contract for The Apprentice, which was a TV show that he was on for a long time. And this starts to spark a lot more speculation that he's going to run for president. And in June 16th, he officially announces his bid for the presidency. So, the Democrats are very well aware of the Trump's candidacy, and they think that it's an advantage to them. They want to use it to their advantage. So in a WikiLeaks memo, apparently the Clinton campaign instructed the DNC to focus on Pied Piper candidates, among them Trump as well as Ted Cruz and Ben Carson. The idea was to lure the GOP primary towards extreme or diverse figures so that it would fracture the Republican base and provide an easier path to victory for Clinton. In other words, they wanted one of these Pied Piper candidates to be the nominee so Clinton could just knock him down. Like they wanted either Trump, Ben Carson, Ted Cruz, because they thought that Clinton would crush any one of those opponents in a general election. So in that regard, Hillary Clinton actually gives Donald Trump airtime during the kind of like the convention stuff. The Republican convention, she's actually giving him more spotlight that he would not have gotten, and that's actually keeping him relevant in the press. All right, so that email was on, or that email that went out that WikiLeaks showed was on April 7th, 2015. So already they're kind of like expecting and hoping that Trump is the candidate. So then Trump himself, he runs on this platform called Make America Great Again. And so his pitch to the American public is like, look how much, the Democrats fucked up the country. We have all this political correctness and there's all this corruption. And look what happened with the financial crisis, and people are losing their jobs. Stuff is not great right now in America. So we need to make America great again. And this is like actually a very powerful kind of movement because, like a lot of people did feel disenfranchised by the last 8 years before, when Obama kind of like fixed the economy per se, but then a lot of people lost their homes. Like I think during the financial crisis, like all those numbers I told you about, people lost their livelihoods. A lot of people just went bankrupt, and that's something that's very difficult to come back from. And Trump was kind of like speaking to a lot of these concerns about jobs and whatever. And, some of these jobs were being lost to automation and whatnot. But I think, that there wasn't enough attention by the Democratic Party for working class issues like these jobs, especially in states that were not Democratic to begin with, like in the red states. And so this is where, I think the Democrat strategy is just to call, it's just like all these angry white Southern or Republican state people who are just racist, and that's the reason they're voting for Trump. It's not because of anything actually that we did. It's just because they're racist, and we provided all this progress with all this racial progress in the past 8 years with Obama, and they just want to reverse it because they're racist and they're white. And this is kind of like the smear campaign that's going on against MAGA, and where I think Hillary Clinton, there was a leaked, when she was talking to DNC people, she was like, these people, they're just deplorables. We don't even think about them. Like they're not going to vote for us. They're just deplorables. And so she's already saying we don't even care about these votes because they are just, first of all, they're southern states and we're going to lose them anyway. And B, they're incorrigible. And so they're already inherently, ontologically evil or, not progressive, I guess. And so this angers, obviously, the Republican base because as well it should, because it flattens, things to just racial concerns and doesn't go into complexities of these economic issues that are actually at play that's going on. So because of this, a lot of people start to, think that Trump is their guy. Trump is the one fighting the establishment. Trump is the one who is taking the Democrats to task because of everything they fucked up, and they're not talking about, which is part of the economy stuff. And this, the overall narrative that Trump is making, is saying that the federal government is corrupt, and he's going to drain the swamp. He's going to he draws attention to domestic issues such as illegal immigration, the exporting of American jobs, to like outsourcing American jobs to other countries where, corporations are, getting cheaper labor from abroad rather than using American workers. And like I said, his overall narrative is that he's going to make the government honest again. And that's why it was great in the beginning, because the country or the government was honest. And so that's his pitch. He's saying the government used to be honest and people could make money back then. People had the opportunity to make something of themselves. But now he's saying that the corruption is so much that that American dream doesn't exist anymore. So what he's saying is make America great again. He's saying make the American dream a thing again. Which of course, Democrats say, like, oh, you want to go back to slavery? Is that what you want to go there? That's when America was great? Or you want to go back to Jim Crow and back before the civil rights movement? And just like all this fucking nonsense about what he's, trying to say, like put all this like emphasis on what he's trying to say. And this Trump, like, he's not the most measured guy either. So he kind of fires back and like exactly what they wanted to say, like kind of like somewhat racist or like not politically correct things. And then they latch onto that and say like, yeah, see, he's racist, like it's just kind of like a little bait and switch thing that's going on during the campaign. So as he's running up the ranks through the Republican establishment, when he first starts his campaign, he's actually a 150-1 shot to win the presidency by, I think it's Ladbrokes, which is like this UK gambling website. And so like nobody thought when he was starting his campaign that he was going to win. I'm betting the CIA didn't think so either. But then when he starts his campaign, it's the Republicans he has to go through first. So he immediately goes on the attack, especially highlighting stuff about Jeb Bush, who is presumably like the heir apparent, after the Bush dynasty, right? So he kind of like singles him out. It's kind of like the idea of like pick the biggest guy in the bully or the biggest guy in the yard or whatever, and pick a fight with him, and you're safe from everyone in jail or whatever. It's that kind of like I guess strategy. And so he hammers at Jeb Bush, highlighting his shortcomings and corruption and catchphrases that stick. It's not stink. Like I think it was like Lion Ted and like low energy Jeb. It's from his experience on TV, he knows how to get a reaction. He knows how to like push people's buttons. He knows how to like make little jabs and like jibs and jabs and like little things to like put someone off their game. And it works. Jeb Bush is immediately like crushed. And in July 14th, he actually has an early lead with 17% support in the GOP, while the next popular contender, Jeb Bush, received 14%. So already he's pulled ahead, like in a couple months or a few months after kind of, announcing his bid. At the end of 2015, he's maintaining his momentum, and surveys show that Trump is unpopular with both women and minority voters, particularly Black Americans, who voted 95% for Obama in 2008. So that was a very, I guess, successful thing by the Democratic Party. Put up a Black president candidate. Guess what's going to happen? All the Black people are going to vote for him. I mean, it's not rocket science, right? That part is pretty easy to see. And so, like, if you have a candidate who is actively attacking Obama's policies and Obama's presidency, of course, the Black Americans who voted for such a hopeful figure back in 2008 are not going to like this Trump guy. So immediately, the Democrats know that this is someone that they can use their entire identity politics playbook for and be successful at. So they're trying to encourage this run because they see him as a target. It's like once he becomes the candidate, now they can attack him for all these like political incorrect gaffes that he made. So that I think was the Democratic strategy. So in 2016, Trump initially loses to Ted Cruz in Iowa, but then he cites that the Cruz campaign falsely implied that Carson was going to drop out to steal his votes, as if like, oh, Ben Carson's going to drop out, and like kind of like insinuating that if he does, that they would endorse Ted Cruz. So he calls Ted Cruz Lion Ted, and this actually helps him a lot because he rebounds in New Hampshire, winning 35% of the primary vote, which is the highest margin in New Hampshire primary for Republicans since 2000. So this is he's already kind of like blasting through some momentum right now, even before the nomination. So in May, Trump wins Indiana, and Cruz finally drops out of the race, making Trump the nominee. Some established Republicans actually refuse to endorse Trump, such as the Bushes, of course, for utterly humiliating Jeb. But they're able to. Trump is able to bully Paul Ryan into endorsing him after Ryan initially says he's not ready to endorse Trump. So what Trump says, the administration says that if he becomes president, he's going to remove Ryan from his RNC post. So immediately afterwards, Paul Ryan endorses Trump, and everyone's on board. Mitch McConnell whips up the troops. Senate Majority Leader, he's Senate Majority Leader at the time, Mitch McConnell. He rallies the troops and says, "The primary voters have spoken, and we must endorse what the people have endorsed, and we need to get behind Trump." So everyone falls in line shortly after that. So there is kind of a little bit of an awkward transition in that point, but they get the troops together. So on the Democratic side, Bernie Sanders actually is a more left-wing candidate than a traditional Democratic candidate. So he was independent since 1978. So he was actually a senator who ran independent for the longest time until 2015. He registers as a Democrat. And this is ostensibly to run for president because, like, I think, I don't think any, maybe like early in our history, some third party candidate won, but I don't think it's happened after the 1800s. I could be wrong about that, maybe whatever. But the point is, it doesn't happen really, or especially like in the modern time. So that's probably why he joined the Democratic Party, to give himself more of a chance to win. So he runs against Hillary Clinton, the former Secretary of State now. So she served as Sec State under Obama, doing all that shit in Benghazi and Libya and all that stuff with him. So in 2016, WikiLeaks reveals DNC emails that showed that Obama staffers were already mocking Sanders. So, like, while Obama was still in office, his staffers were already, like, working against Sanders and in favor of Clinton. Journalist Victoria Brownworth in 2020, apparently she claimed that at that time in 2016, Obama pressured Sanders to quit, worried that his campaign was splitting the party and helping Trump. So you have a situation where they wanted the candidate that they got. The DNC wanted the candidate. But now they're saying to Bernie, hey, you need to drop out because this is hurting us against Trump. So you see kind of like the machinations that's going on, and the inconsistencies, and it's just kind of like, it's clear that they thought it was, or more that it was like, it's Hillary Clinton's turn, right? Now that we got the first black man in president, if we can get the first woman president, we'll like fucking, collect all the glory and whatever, and we'll look like the woke scientists of the world, or the woke, I don't know, what you get what I mean. So then, eventually, Sanders does leave the race, and Clinton becomes the nominee. And so during the debates, Trump actually trips up Clinton by calling out the entire federal government as corrupt and the bourgeois system as corrupt, citing that he actually knows this because he uses the system to pay his taxes. And he says, like, the reason why he doesn't pay taxes is because the system is corrupt and it allows him to take advantage of that situation. So it's like, yeah, if I'm allowed to do this, I'm going to do it because I'm smart, because like that's what everyone else is doing. But it doesn't make the fact that this system is corrupt incorrect. So what I'm saying is like true because I'm actually using it, and I know it's corrupt because I use it. And so this causes audience members to be like, oh, fuck, like this guy's saying some stuff that like we've never heard from a politician before. And so they try to use because like the entire time, I think the strategy from the Podesta team or whatever was that they were going to use the identity politics stuff to, paint him as a racist and misogynist, whatever, blah, blah, blah. But also they wanted to point out his corrupt business practices as kind of like a smear attempt. And it's just kind of like, well, that doesn't work when he uses that kind of like judo move, like to turn it back on. It's like, yeah, I might be corrupt, sure, but the only reason why is because you let me. So like effectively like destroying their strategy. Like it's a very smart move. And so by election night, many liberal pundits have Clinton winning at 95%, such as the New York Times. Like Trump campaigns were aggressively in swing states, while Clinton's campaign was lackadaisical late in the race. So this was a sign that the Democrats felt like they had it in the bag, that this was a guaranteed win almost, that the liberals were like, yeah, no one's going to vote for Trump or blah, 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 or whatever. But, as we all know, Trump wins by a slim margin in the Electoral College from 306 to 232. I didn't actually realize that's actually considered a slim margin. Apparently, it's one of the slimmest margins in electoral history. But as a result, like last time, only 8% of Black Americans voted for Trump due to all that stuff, and
CNN's Van Jones calls the result an American white lash, making the claim that white supremacy had once again taken America by storm, as if it was, as if we canceled it the entire time or whatever, or we solved it before, but now it's returned. And, despite the fact that a lot of the people in those swing states that voted for Trump in 2016, they actually voted for Obama. So they didn't want to explain that kind of incongruity, but they wanted to just say like, oh, it's because they're racist. More racists came out and voted for Trump. So liberals all over the country, they're screaming that the country is descending into fascism. They look completely hysterical. But at this point, it doesn't look that crazy to be that hysterical, because Trump was kind of like being a little brash and arrogant and kind of like giving Democrats all the fuel they needed to smear him. So it wasn't like that was totally out of the question that something, that stuff could happen. But I think, especially later on when we realized in 2024 how bullshit all of their shit was. I think looking back, a lot of that was just like over fucking like hysterical bullshit. Especially now, like we've seen Trump's first term and we've seen Biden's first term, and yeah, we can conclude that one of those terms was slightly less bad than the other. Actually, very much less bad than the other, but okay. And so after the election, of course, the Democrats are not going to rest on the laurels. In 2017, there's an immediate investigation into potential collusion between Trump and the Russian officials by the FBI and the Senate and House Intelligence Committees. FBI Director Robert Mueller, who reports in 2019 after the investigation that the investigation did not conclude that Trump committed a crime. So it was all a hoax. Everyone, there was no actual proof of Russian collusion. So, but you see in the media today, they still use that fucking line because people still think that there was Russian collusion, because there was so much propaganda that was saying that there was Russian collusion that a certain amount of people still think that it's true. And so they never, apologize for that, of course, because they want it still in the zeitgeist, because they use it today still, especially when they're talking about Russia, Ukraine, and like, how Donald Trump is best friends with Putin, and that's why that's happening that way. So they still are using that kind of like propaganda rhetoric to boost their own narrative. Okay, so part of the reason Trump actually won was the more advanced use of social media. So I know that Obama used social media for the first time, kind of like, because Twitter had just come out and Facebook was already out, but like by 2016, people had kind of like figured out data analytics a lot better. There was much more kind of information about like engagement and stuff like that. So there was this firm called Cambridge Analytica that was hired by the Trump administration. And what they do is that they survey users for payment. So they pay users X amount of dollars to take a survey. And so this gets information about their political stuff and like what their views are and other stuff like that. But what they did was they also used the information not to just survey the users, but also use that to survey their friends as well. So this part is, I guess, the non-good part or whatever of what they did, or the non-legal part. I don't even fucking know I'm not a lawyer. This is not legal advice, but they did some shady shit, I guess, in that department, where not just was it the people that they were paying, but they were kind of getting information on their friends as well. So this is all like data that they're collecting from Facebook. And so the Trump campaign, it's revealed that Trump used Cambridge Analytica systems services in 2016. Also, like I said before with the Gamergate stuff, they captured that right-wing meme culture that was kind of like sparking in that during that time, and they used those memes like from 4chan or whatever to promote on Facebook and Twitter to like get people excited about Trump, and it worked. So Cambridge Analytica gets sued, I think, or I think they have to pay some fine or whatever like that. But they in the grand scheme of things, it wasn't like they did anything like super illegal. They just had a smarter way of going about like their digital strategy than the Democrats did, because Hillary Clinton did jack shit, right? So that's another kind of just like crying about shit. So then during his actual campaign, he does talk about immigration reform. So he enacts several policies like, so the Muslim travel ban, U.S.-Mexico border wall, and other policies meant to protect American workers, which the liberals used to smear him as racist. And so this was actually, I think, when the whole debate about H-1B visas started to come, I think like we saw a little bit more about like what this debate was actually about. And for me, it's a very complicated thing, because it's hard to tease out if you're not really like cognizant of what's actually going on the ground. But what I understand now is that a lot of these liberal cities, they're pushing for immigration because now they can, hire these cheap workers for less. That's all these big cities, they need workers that can like, wait tables, or a lot of immigrants go to like the restaurant industry and or the food industry, or basically they wanted just cheaper labor to be in the United States. They weren't doing it for like altruistic reasons, like, oh yeah, we need to give Latinx people, from South America more opportunities. Like, how dare we, be these entitled Americans that are trying to keep them out? That's the narrative. But what's really happening is like not the voting shit. They want cheaper labor so they can maintain the system with their PMC jobs. And so they'll let the Mexicans and the Puerto Ricans and all the other Hispanic immigrants do all the grunt work that they never will want to do, right? Because that's what immigrants do in those cities, and so that's what's actually happening. And so Trump is kind of like pointing this out, of like, oh, you're actually just using cheaper labor. This is what the immigration problem is about. This is what you're doing. But they turn it around on him and said, you're anti-Latinx and all this fucking shit, right? So in 2017, there's a Unite the Right rally that starts violence in Charlottesville, Virginia. This rally was organized ostensibly to prevent a Robert E. Lee statue from being taken down due to a recent shooting at Charleston Church. It was a predominantly black church that was shot up by this white nationalist terrorist. And so I guess the city was contemplating removing Robert E. Lee statue because it was part of the Confederacy. And so the Republicans, or some, so what's strange about this Unite the Right rally immediately when you look at it is that, yes, there are all these right-wing Nazi and KKK affiliated organizations that are kind of like going with this, right? But when you look at the details from all these organizations, most of them were created within the past 2 years, like 2013, 2014, and most of them become defunct by 2018. So to me, I feel like there were federal fucking operatives in this protest that were literally instigating shit to make it look like more of a Nazi rally than just like kind of like a Southern pride of their stuff, like Robert E. Lee and people that they respected from the Union. And that's more of a complicated tack that I kind of understand more since I went to school at Duke. So I understand the Southern mentality when it comes to that. And they have somewhat of a point, but it's hard to explain in a 30-second soundbite. So I'm not going to do that right now. But you can ask me about that later, I guess, if you're really curious. Anyway, Liberal counter protesters, actually, they hear about this, rally, and so they organize to kind of counter protests. And so this includes BLM, DSA, and Antifa, who some of them which came armed as well. So you have people, Nazis on the right, or these Nazi organizations, and then you have these left-wing terrorist organizations on the left. And it's just kind of like, you see a little bit of federal operative influence. Like, I think there were federal operatives on both sides. Like, we saw in the USAID stuff, revelations, that we were, playing both sides of the Israel stuff, right? So is it hard? It's so hard to believe that, like, the federal government was kind of like using operatives for both sides. I don't think it's that big of a stretch. Of course, I don't have any proof for that, but this is like what I'm pointing out. So Virginia isn't actually an open carry state. So that means, like, most states are usually concealed carry, if they even allow carry. Like, for example, I think California is concealed carry. So this means they can, it's like the Wild West. You can put it all up on your holsters and, like, so this makes UVA make an announcement saying, don't attend the rally. There's likely possible violence at the rally. All the hospitals in the area are canceled. They canceled all their elective surgeries to prepare for the emergencies. So already UVA kind of knows there's a fucking storm coming that, the American police are kind of letting happen. If UVA knows this, like, do you think the FBI and the police don't know this? They know that it's going to fucking result in some sort of, like, terrible tragedy. That's what they want. Right? So then that happens. A 32-year-old paralegal is killed when a Nazi sympathizer rams his car into a crowd of counter-protesters, injuring 35 others. Others are injured in the clashes. So, this causes a major shitstorm for Trump. And then he quotes saying, like, you have people that were very fine people on both sides. And this is taken out of context, because what he's saying is that, like, yeah, there was a rally where there were people that were protesting for Robert E. Lee, like they wanted their statue. So he's talking about those people as very fine people. And then on the other side too, yeah, there were genuine people who were fighting for, rights. But what he's also saying is that, like, on both sides, you had instigators. You had the fucking Nazis, of course, and you had Antifa. And so he was basically saying, like, you got to separate the wheat from the chaff. Like, not everyone here was bad person. Like, you're not just a bad person for, like, wanting to protect your, I guess, like, cultural icons or whatever. You're just maybe there's a misunderstanding or whatever, but you're not trying to, like, cause violence. You're just trying to, like, protect, like, Southern, I guess, culture or identity or whatever the case may be. And yes, of course, like, he was the general during the Civil War, but he was also very respected by the Union generals as well. It wasn't like they considered him just like a racist who was whatever. He was just more. The story of Robert E. Lee is very complex. You can look into it. That's why I didn't want to explain it. But basically, essentially, yeah, it was a lot more complex than people are making it out to be. Like, flattening into, like, again, just like, oh, racist or not racist, right? So regardless, Democrats successfully smeared Trump. Even I, buy it at the time. I'm just kind of like, yeah, this is kind of fucked up, man. But, like, I'm still not really paying attention because I'm just like, this is just a clown show. I'm still pretty apolitical at this point, but I'm just kind of like, yeah, that's kind of fucked up to say. But I don't think too much of it at the time. That's all I kind of think. But yeah, that is a testament to the successfulness of their campaigns against Trump. Like, I bought it, right? And so one curious thing is that, that I mentioned this already. Okay, so then on the other side, Democrats are doing all this stuff politically, but then now it's time for that woke stuff to be that we incubated all that time to now come out in full force and be accepted. So like what basically my idea is that, or my thinking is that through the 8 years of Obama's presidency, we got, a black president, right? So that was the first big thing of like, oh shit, we're progressive now because we got a black president, all this time. And nobody even thought this was going to happen in our lifetimes, right? This is crazy. Like even Tupac Shakur was like, we ain't going to ever see a black president, right? So that happens like literally just 10 years after Tupac makes that song or whatever. So like everyone's like, oh yeah, we have ascended to progress, or that was kind of like the idea of that eight years. So when you have that narrative in place, it's kind of like everything we did and said is true. Everything we did and said, we create kind of like almost like a religion where everything we say and do is right and correct. Like fuck everything else, fuck Christianity, right? Because that's the white male Republican thing to fuck every religion in the world. Fuck Islam, because that's connected to Christianity, and they're also terrorists, and basically just fuck religion, and we're gonna make our own rules from now on that are progressive and that speak for the people, and it's based on identity. Because like they're seeing that this works, right? If you hammer on people's identity and you make that a big thing, you can manipulate people into thinking like, hey, they're on your side because they're fighting for your, gender or mental illness or race or anything like that, right? So that's kind of like what they've been doing for the past 8 years to build this woke machine in place. Okay, so then in 2016, keep in mind, I'm not saying that any of these creators worked with the CIA, though some may or may not, or the FBI, some may or may not. But what I am saying is that they were affected definitely by the Obama administration in making these things. So like I think Obama kind of during his presidencies put it into the zeitgeist that this is the new way of thinking of progress. Progress is when we take care of identities, right? So in 2016, Moonlight is released. And this is a movie about a black American gay man's journey through his childhood into adolescence and finally into adult. Movie is actually pretty good. I'm not gonna lie, I liked it when I watched it. And what's interesting about this movie is that it actually hits a small snafu during the Oscars, because it does win Best Picture, but when that happens, the announcers actually say La La Land first, and then which is a song about Hollywood and the death of jazz, almost kind of like opposite of identity politics, right? Like it's like this white guy like bemoaning jazz's death, and you have like the black pop singer who's just like making money but not really preserving the real art of jazz that he is now preserving. But you have this movie called La La Land, which was a huge hit in Hollywood, lose to Moonlight in this weird fashion where they read La La Land first, but then it's like, oh fuck, it was actually Moonlight. Sorry about that. And so I'm not saying that that's significant in itself, but it's just kind of like this. There's a lot of strange shit going around. Okay. And so, this is also significant because traditionally, especially in the black entertainment sphere, black Americans are, in that entertainment sphere. I'm not talking about in general. I don't want to make I don't want to cast any aspersions on people. But in the black entertainment sphere, it is pretty, for lack of a better word, homophobic. Especially when you listen to gangster rap in the 1990s, in the early 2000s. It's around this time that stuff starts to shift. too in that direction. So this is significant because for the longest time, black entertainment did not go in this direction at all. And I'm not saying, this is propaganda or anything like that, but I'm just trying to point out the subtle things that are happening that I think most people don't catch. And me being in the industry, I feel like I've seen all these things and I can kind of see how woke was incubated. Anyway, let's move on. So in 2017, there's actually this movement called Me Too. So it's kind of like similar to Black Lives Matter. Instead, they created a hashtag called Me Too. It was actually created in 2006 by a sexual assault survivor, Tarana Burke. But in 2017, there's revelations that Harvey Weinstein had sexually assaulted multiple actresses and all this other stuff that came out with big players like Kevin Spacey and these executives that got kind of burned. Not burned because they were actually they were just creeps. There was a lot of creeps in the industry. I mean, everyone kind of knew that was a thing, but we had documented proof for the first time that this was happening. And so Alyssa Milano, who was an actress, created this hashtag to kind of highlight this sexual assault stuff and abuse in the industry. Ronan Farrow, who was the son of Mia Farrow and Woody Allen, he was the investigative reporter who broke this case and that drew attention to it and caused a whole kind of firestorm in Hollywood. Soon, other Hollywood titans are canceled or pushed out. This causes a major power shift because now creators are afraid to make content that critiques non-white, non-cis male characters because they were fear of being canceled, of being a racist or misogynist, right? So soon afterwards, in 2017, the same year, RuPaul's Drag Race was later moved from Paramount's more fringe Logo TV channel. So Logo TV is a channel that focuses on LGBTQIA2S plus audiences. I'm not actually making that up. That is actually what their stated slogan is. So I'm actually not making that up. LGBTQIA2S plus audiences. And then they moved that from Paramount moves this from that channel to VH1, which is much more, it's kind of like their MTV kind of offshoot. And they later moved it to MTV itself in 2022. It's not as big. Obviously, all those channels are not as big today, but they still do have significant influence. And that they're literally pushing it out now more in 2017. What also happens? So in the show, RuPaul's Drag Race, this is a show actually that was first started for gay men to compete in Drag Race. So they would cross-dress as women, and they would do these competitions in these Drag Race. I guess it's kind of like a cultural kind of thing. Transvestites, not transsexuals. So it's interesting too because RuPaul himself had a small snafu early in 2014. He uses the term she-male, or it says you've got she-male. So some people say, or some, I guess, trans people thought that was transphobic, and he later gives an interview saying that he probably won't have trans women on the show because, in his opinion, the show is about gay men making a statement about femininity. They're not dressing up like women. They're dressing up like hyper feminine. They're doing this expression that's almost like surrealism of this hyper femininity, and that trans identity had nothing to do with what he was trying to accomplish with Drag Race. So in 2017, that's actually when the switch happens from this Logo TV to VH1. Okay, so then when this happens, they also introduced the first open transgender women contestants. Ratings from reviewers go up immediately. I mean, it was kind of like mediocre reviews in the 70s and 80s, but after that, they started to more average in the 90s, 80s and 90s. So it's not a huge shift, but it is kind of a noticeable reviews are being better, right? And they're putting it up on this now much more watched show because LGBTQIA2S plus channels are not the most places, I guess. And so the other thing too was that so that's the thing too with the show's tagline was actually "Gentlemen, start your engines and may the best woman win." So it's kind of like a tongue-in-cheek reference to like they are still men, but they're competing as women, right? So that's kind of like what the show's original tagline was. But now was changed to "Racers, start your engines and may the best drag queen win," because they want it to be more inclusive now, right? They wanted to include now trans women. And so after that happened, there's been more and more trans women on the show kind of like sharing their stories about coming out trans and like, you know, and all this other stuff. And so, yeah, it's being pushed, right? So I did some research myself, you know, when people talk about trans genocide, and, you know, by all measures I could find on the internet, it seemed that on average, every year, 2 to 3 per 100,000 people die or from murder that are trans. And actually and so what I also found is the national average for getting murdered is 5 to 6 per 100K. So actually, if you are trans, you actually have a less of a chance of being murdered than the average human. And not only that, like the majority of the people who do get killed as a trans woman are black, first of all. And most of those people, I think it was like 60-70% of all trans death are black women. So then, you know, like if you're a white trans woman, like, yeah, you might get like weird stares or whatever, but you're not really at risk of getting killed, right? At the same rate as even like the regular person. You're actually like based on the data, you're actually doing better in terms of like not getting killed. So it's clearly like a manipulation of the narrative of this like trans genocide, like this idea of trans genocide on the left. And not only that, the last thing is a lot of those people who do get killed are usually Johns. Their murder people are usually Johns that hired them for sex work and did not like that they were misadvertised to, or whatever the case may be. Or maybe they you know had sex with them and they didn't want anyone to know that they had sex with a trans woman or whatever, something like that. So, you know, like, yeah, you're gonna get murdered a lot if you participate in very risky behavior like that. Like, yes, if I was, you know, a prostitute myself, I would expect to get killed much more often, you know, like than the average person. So it's just kind of like, it's not that you're trans that it's actually dangerous. It's more like some of the activities trans people do that, you know, makes it dangerous for them. So I just wanted to kind of like highlight that because, you know, I did a lot of looking up numbers and this is what I found. And I can talk about that more if you really want. Just message me again. Okay, so then after that, Get Out is released in the same time. It's actually a pretty cool horror movie, but it's about a black man and a white woman couple meeting, and they're meeting her parents for the first time. And I don't want to spoil it, but it talks about kind of like you know, it talks about racial issues in a very smart way. But what's significant about it is that it's a smash success. And, you know, this was Jordan Peele's first movie. And everyone was like, oh my God, this is like amazing, blah, blah, blah. And like, but funnily enough, I feel like a lot of white liberals missed the meaning of that. So that's why I wanted to bring Get Out up, actually. So Get Out is actually a critique on white liberals. It's not a critique on white conservatives because like there's a line where it's like, I would have voted for Obama 3 times, you know? And so what's interesting about that is that like when white women saw it or whatever, they still thought the white woman character was still the good guy that was with the black character the entire time instead of, you know, being an evil I guess it did spoil it, but evil with the entire rest of the family. And so they didn't get it. They thought the white girl was the good guy, the good person or that she was just fooled by the rest of her family, and so she was actually trying to, I don't know, for whatever, they saw themselves in that character and they couldn't accept that they were being critiqued. That's how much cognitive dissonance, white liberals have about racism in general. But yeah, it's significant also because it was this very low budget horror film, but it crushes at the box office. Like it gets like $100-something million or whatever. And this is, it's literally like a $5 million budget film. So like, execs in Hollywood are salivating over this. They're like, oh shit, woke is in. We got to make more woke shit because like that's where the money is. And and that happens with Jordan Peele. He gets 2 more movies. Like he gets like a deal with Universal and all that stuff. Wonder Woman is also released this time. It scores $827 million at the box office. And it's the first superhero film that had a predominantly female audience at 52%. 2018. In 2018, Black Panther is released. That generates $1.35 billion in revenue. And, Marvel is kind of like hitting all cylinders at this point, with Civil War. But this is still like, at the time it was released, it was still the 9th largest box office hit. And really only the Avengers and Iron Man kind of like sit in that same category of like making that much money, or like Spider-Man. So this was huge. Like, this is like, oh shit. Like, but like the thing about this movie is that Black Panther is literally a psyop against the black community. I mean, you have black on black violence. First of all, they're not attacking the white people, right? It's Killmonger against the Black Panther, right? And second of all, they're telling the nice CIA man, played by, what was the name? The English dude. I forget his name now. Martin Freeman, I think. Yeah. The nice CIA man is helping the Black Panther on his path to take down the evil Black Panther, or the evil black man. And then they set up their, Black Panther like school in Oakland. And this is kind of like a huge, like, disrespect to the actual Black Panthers, in my opinion. This is like kind of like railroading them and making this like stupid fucking liberal bullshit of like kumbaya nonsense about who the Black Panthers actually were. And when you see the second movie, it's the same fucking shit. It's like, wait, the black people, now they're going after the Native Americans who are trying to protect their shit from the white people trying to steal their shit. It's like, what side are you on right now? Like, and unfortunately, black liberal audiences ate this shit up. They like, they saw themselves in this character. They saw themselves as a hero, and they saw themselves as not only just a hero, but a hero for America. And this is kind of like what happened during the Civil Rights Movement. Well, and I'll talk about that God, there's so many things I want to talk about, but I need to. This is already getting long in the tooth, so I gotta tighten up. But I'll talk about that later. And so another movie comes out so this is Green Book. This was made like by white people. This wasn't Moonlight. But it does win Best Picture, just like Moonlight did, because it's almost like this hilariously stupid, cartoonishly stupid movie about racism, where like the driver, who's like this Southern guy or whatever, is driving around this black kind of musician, and he's kind of like, initially he's like kind of racist and whatever, but then they pit the black dude against like these cartoonishly racist people who are like, blah blah blah, n-word, and still like, and so like that white guy, his driver, ends up being the hero of the story by defending him against whatever. And so it comes out actually that the people that the story was based on, the musician that the story is based on, said like, a lot of this shit is fucking bullshit. It's like, the same sort of stuff that fucking, Obama did in 1995 with his narrative about what happened. They were saying that this did not happen like this. But it does end up winning Best Picture at the Oscars, solidifying that like woke is in, right? So then another thing happens, Crazy Rich Asians, which is the first mostly Asian cast film since Joy Luck Club in 1993, comes out in 2018. This is actually made because the book itself was a hit with white women. So this was the thing that greenlit the thing at the studio, because what it comes out later that initially they wanted the Constance Wu person to be a white woman, because the point of that is that they know white women love this book. So when they want them to watch the movie, they know that women love escapist fantasy because they picture themselves in the main character. They're living out this like adventure, romantic adventure with this woman. So if you make the woman a white woman, that'll get more white women to come to this movie, who ostensibly are the main audience for this movie. Of course, the Constance Wu does not frame it in this way. They just say, oh, well, they're racist, and I was the progressive person to stop them from being racist. And John Chu was also this progressive person who stopped them from being racist, and we made sure that their racist idea was not implemented, and so we are so progressive. And so this is kind of like the bullshit that they put for the Asian American community. And Childish Gambino in that same year, 2018, he releases This Is America, which wins Record of the Year, Song of the Year. So it's kind of like clear that woke is in terms of Hollywood. 2019, Marvel releases Captain Marvel, which also makes $1.131 billion at the box office. Still, it's less predominantly male, but it is still like 55-45 male. And this is kind of like, oh, even men are getting woke, right? Like even men are coming out to see these feminist films or whatever. And so, this is kind of like the cycle of woke that's going on. In 2019, there's that cringe scene at the end of Endgame where all the women team up and protect Spider-Man. Everyone knows that fucking cringe scene. And at the time, I didn't, I thought it was cringe for sure, but I didn't clock what was going on. So now I am. And the reason it's cringe is because, it was just so obvious pandering. Like, let's fucking be fucking real here, all right? That was so fucking lame to have like a scene of like all the women just, doing their thing. It's just like, in what universe does this happen in actual reality? Like, no, this is just stupid fucking pandering. And so by 2020, it's clear that Hollywood, was on the woke train. They obviously didn't like Trump, and they were pandering to liberal audiences as well to feed them more diverse content, to make them feel like, they were being more inclusive by watching this woke content. It's like, oh, if I'm a white person and I want to become more woke, all I got to do is watch this Hollywood shit, and now I'm more progressive. It kind of created this feedback loop of like, I am a better person for watching this woke content. Now I understand the black experience. Now I understand the Asian experience. Like it's all this fucking bullshit. All right. And so that was, but at the end of the day, all those woke content, that's still made by the Hollywood machine. And what that means is it's still made with white money, like white liberal money. And so at the end of the day, like I said with Black Panther and like I said with Crazy Rich Asians, they are still dictating their version of what black people are, what Asian people are. It's not what black, yes, Black Panther itself had black creators and all this whatnot, but it's really Marvel, or Disney rather, that's putting the money into the situation. So it's just like, without that money, you can't make that shit. And so that's kind of like how they still control the media, even if it looks like the creators are creating it, they still control the money. And that's how Hollywood works. If you control the money, you control what is said. Okay. So then COVID-19 starts to be the kind of like the final blow against the Trump presidency. So by obviously we've seen that the primary agenda of the Democrats is to attack attack Trump by saying that his only agenda is to invalidate Obama's policies and attack those in Washington, whoever humiliated him. Like, he's just an egotistical narcissist who's just going for himself. And, this is a very effective kind of like message, because like it is somewhat true. I mean, like, we can see that Trump is this sort of narcissistic, weird, it's not like he's not, right? And so it's very effective because, they it's like anyone can kind of see these gaffes that he's making and kind of be like, oh God, that's this again, right? But they couch it in a way where it's like, oh, we didn't do anything wrong. And Trump has 0 point. Like, everything Trump says is incorrect. And that's where I kind of like am like, I don't know about that, especially now, right? But even back then, I was like, I don't know about that. So, yeah. So then, during his actual presidency, when you look back on the first term, he did actually reduce unemployment before COVID-19 hit, which included actual gains for Black and Hispanic workers. And he presided over no new wars, something that a feat was accomplished by only 5 presidents. But yes, of course, he killed Soleimani and all that stuff. So I'm not saying he's like this saint or whatever. But that's kind of crazy. Like, this is, in an imperialist standpoint, that's very significant. Like, not starting any war being a feat only accomplished by 5 presidents in our history. There's been 47 presidents now. So it's like only 5 of them did not start a war. That's kind of insane. And some of the negative policies that the Democrats were calling out for, they actually keep in place or even strengthened during the Biden administration, right? Like the border stuff and all this other stuff. So, they're trying to smear him for all this stuff, but in actuality, his first term was not that bad in terms of like actual results. And so as a result, he's putting in a pretty decent candidacy for a second term. So I remember in the beginning of 2020, all these polls were saying Trump was still the favorite over the field in the Democratic field. And so, but of course, as we all know, COVID-19 hit, and basically because he totally mishandles the situation, the mood starts to shift on Trump, even from his main supporters. And so the Democrats, they seize upon this opportunity, right? So they see that during this time, Bernie Sanders is also gaining traction. Remember, like from 2016, now he's gaining traction again. He's running again, and he's saying like, see, like this is what happened when like we did what the Democrats were doing last time, and that's how Trump got into office. We got to address these issues that Trump pointed out. But then once they see that COVID-19 is having this effect on the Trump presidency, they team up. So they literally team up. So, okay. So then at the time before Super Tuesday, which was March 3rd, 2020, at the time, I think there were like 5 or so main candidates still. It was like, I think it was like Joe Biden, Bernie Sanders, of course. There was Pete Buttigieg. I think there was Amy Klobuchar, and I think that smaller, Tom Steyer and all these other people might have been still in there here in the mix or whatever. But Klobuchar and Pete Buttigieg are the important ones because they have significant pull Klobuchar is an actual senator, I think, in Minnesota or something like that, and Pete is a mayor in Indiana. So they are kind of more the establishment Democrats that so reported on March 2nd. So this probably happened likely before that, but Obama apparently pushes the other Democrats to get behind Biden. So again, he is endorsing Biden or his candidate over Bernie Sanders because he does not want Bernie Sanders to win. So Sanders' campaign started to surge, because like now people can see it's possible to get Medicare for all, especially with COVID, it's just kind of like, yeah, we need Medicare for all like pronto, right? Because like we don't know how sick everyone's going to get. And so Sanders is gaining momentum, but then because of all this Voltroning, basically they tell Amy Klobuchar and Pete Buttigieg to pull out and endorse Biden, which they do right before Super Tuesday, right? So nobody has any time to even like talk about what happened, whatever, because like, the Sanders campaign was caught blindsided by this, and then all of them fucking like Voltron towards Biden right before South Carolina. And this is significant too, because South Carolina is a heavily black state. 24% of South Carolina is black. And what did we know from last time? 95% of black voters voted for Obama. So if Obama is endorsing Biden as this is his guy, right? Of course, what are the black Americans going to think? Yeah, they're gonna vote for Joe Biden, right? It's not fucking rocket science. Like let's be fucking real. It's not fucking rocket science. One of the most racist senators in Democrat history, right? He was best buddies with Strom Thurmond, a legendary racist South Carolina congressman. I think he was a senator as well. And, he was the architect of the 1994 crime bill, where he was just kind of like talking about that super predator shit, whatever, that Hillary got a lot of flack for in 2016, but apparently it doesn't matter anymore in 2020. 4 years later, after all this woke programming, Biden's shit doesn't matter. It's just, because Trump is so evil and so racist that even Biden is a palatable option, right? And so, what ends up happening is that they endorse, and curiously enough, Pete Buttigieg gets upgraded to Secretary of Transportation when Biden wins, which is actually a major upgrade politically. Like, if you're a mayor in the random city in fucking Indiana, no one knows who the fuck you are. But if you are like the Secretary of Transportation, now you've gotten a cabinet position under your belt. Now you've hung out with the big boys, and now you're like kind of a known quantity. So it's obvious that like he was grifting for a favor, or dropped out for that favor. Because like. Also, he was very incompetent as the Secretary of Transportation, as we saw in the Ohio disaster, and we're seeing in the constant plane FAA fuck-ups right now on runways. We clearly see that Pete Buttigieg was not good at his job. But then afterwards, to silence critics about all this machinations, the Democrats put out the slogan, "Blue no matter who." And this is an effective one as well. They're like, yeah, blue no matter who, got to beat the orange man bad. And so you can't even think about, all this other crap. This is the nominee. We got to rally behind him, right? There's no time to even investigate any of this stuff you're talking about. Bernie lost fair and square. You're fucking Bernie bro. You're a racist white. They even called like Bernie bros white supremacists, whatever, fucking idiots. And so what also helps that tack is in May, George Floyd dies as a result of police brutality incident in Minnesota. And this sparks nationwide BLM protests. And this is like, this hits a scale that's kind of like unprecedented. Like almost like basically, I think the last time riots of this scale for this kind of thing happened, well, obviously LA riots, but I think Martin Luther King's death, there were similar kinds of riots all over the country. And so this causes billions of dollar damage, which I think is also federal. And I think there were federal infiltrators as well, posing as anarchists who were, damaging shit. And, there's fucking CIA everywhere, right? This is a USAID CIA show. I'm sticking with that. I think there were federal operatives in that thing as well. But that does happen, and it gives the Democrats all this fucking ammo against Trump. Like, now you're racist, and this is for sure. This happened under your watch. This is all due to your policies. Even though Minnesota is in a blue state, right? Minnesota hasn't been red since like I think it was like the 1980s. So this is like a crazy assertion, right? Like, all these police brutality events, they're actually mostly happening in New York, in Los Angeles, in Detroit, or whatever, Chicago. And these are all liberal cities. So what are you doing, blaming the Republicans for? This is due to your negligence, not the Trump campaign. But it does work, right? Because people don't think about those nuances. People don't understand those nuances. They just buy whatever the Democrats said, because we had 8 cool years with Obama, who was this progressive, cool dude who was this, leader of everything, right? And so, speaking of Obama, during this time, even during Black Lives Matter, which is supposed to be ostensibly like this progressive movement, he kind of is like, you know what, NBA players, I think you need to just shut up and dribble. That's kind of like what he said to them. They were Chris Paul, LeBron James, and I think some other players were like we should go on strike. We need to, show solidarity with Black Lives Matter. We need to possibly make a strike. And we're not even playing anyway. Due to the lockdowns. So why don't we just call it a strike? And because they did eventually play playoffs later on in the season, but there was a time when they were going to cancel the season due to the Black Lives Matter. And so Obama tells them to stand down. He also failed the Black community in Ferguson when that happened. And he also, failed them in Flint with the fake water drinking. And so it's just like, Black people are kind of like, they're starting to, some are starting to see the fucking bullshit of Obama. Not a lot, but some are. And so, but the rest, most of the Black community still is on board with BLM. And that event was kind of pretty bad. And so, that was a real event that happened. And so, but what was strange about this as well is that as these Black Lives Matter protests are happening, wokeism had gone global, or it seemed, right? So, because in South Korea, this is a very traditionally conservative country, right? A lot of people don't know this, but America installed basically a dictator, Syngman Rhee, who was a fundamentalist Christian. So there was Christianity that was more Catholic based in Korea before that. They had gotten Christianity a little bit in the 1600s and much more when the Americans visited in the 1800s. But really, it was Syngman Rhee's presidency that made Christianity much more of an established thing in Korea. Because, as we see now, I think 33% of Koreans are Christian, whereas less than, I think, 1% are Christian in Japan. So you can see the penetration rates, right? Japan and South Korea, they bought all that Christian stuff from the Americans, right? Because the other thing was that the American military was right in Korea for the longest time, and they were influencing that as well. And so you're telling these people that Christianity is the way, but now you're telling those people that, just kidding, now we're woke, now we're about queer identity, now we have to accept gay marriages and all this stuff that's very explicitly written about in the Bible against. And it's just kind of creating this cognitive dissonance where it's wait, you created these rules before for us, but now you're creating these other rules. And so what I think is it is just basically the CIA is creating this ideology of wokeism, or they were attempting to create this ideology of wokeism as like, hey, that country is homophobic. Hey, that country is transphobic. We need to go in there and do a military operation to free the trans people or whatever. And you know, like for imperialist purposes. It's kind of like, it's another version of the white man's burden. You know, this was a song in the 1899 that was written about the Philippines and how the American colonization of the Philippines, it was very brutal at the time. Like not, but reports of this started coming back to America, and people were like, wait, what's going on in the Philippines? So Rudyard Kipling writes this song saying like, oh, it's the white man's burden. You know, they were so uncivilized, and what we're doing is that we're bringing them to civilization, and they can't do it on their own. So it's on us. So the reason why we're there is it's our burden. It's our job, actually, to help these savages develop a civilization, when really it was just all fucking propaganda and bullshit. So the same thing is happening here, where it's like, oh, we have to teach you South Koreans now how to be civilized again, right? You weren't civilized before when you didn't even know about Christianity. Now you have Christianity, it's somewhat civilized, but now we canceled that, so now wokeism is the new religion, so you got to listen to that now. And then they also, this is like a huge pride flag that was hung in the U.S. embassy in Korea, which also had a Black Lives Matter thing. You know, in a country where it's less than 0.1% black, and most of them are U.S. military, if they are, this seemed to be a stupid kind of sign to post in South Korea. So as a result of all that machinations of COVID-19, I think is the biggest thing, but also BLM and all this stuff, Biden wins the 2020 presidential election. And though Trump and his supporters dispute this victory, they say that mail-in ballots were used, and this opened up the opportunity for voter fraud. So they do an insurrection on January 6th. But I also think that this insurrection also had federal operatives. Basically, I'm seeing CIA in every single part of this fucking, you know, presidency. Just like, you know, and that's why when Trump says he suspects that Obama has the FBI spying on him, like at first when I heard that like a long time ago, I was like, what are you talking about, man? But like seeing all of this, I'm like, man, like he kind of has a case, right? So then after the insurrection, of course, the reason why I think it's probably a Fed op is because like the fucking AOC and all the Democrats cry about it as if like this was a huge thing and like Trump needs to be locked away forever and whatever. And it's just kind of like, all right, AOC, like let's fucking calm down. You are not in danger. All right, let's be real. So then it seems like Orange Man was killed and wokeism won, right? So that's after Biden wins. That's what's kind of like, you know, hooray, hooray, the witch is dead, the Wicked Witch of the West. And so during the entirety of the Biden presidency, even though Trump was no longer in office, if you criticize Biden at all, it'd be like, well, yeah, but Trump is bad or Trump is worse. And it's just kind of like, okay. And that already happened. So I don't know why you're bringing it up again. But we're talking about Biden now. But they kept using that over and over again. It was like Trump derangement syndrome, for real. Like people just did not engage with any of the policies or politics or actual issues at play. They just said, Orange Man bad, you suck, you're racist. And, you know, that was kind of like, that kind of won a lot of arguments at the time in 2020, 2021. Like, people were fucking brainwashed to the maximum. And then, like I said before, Biden continues many of the policies, such as the ICE deportations, which actually increased under Biden's policies. So deportations actually increase while illegal processing also increases. So they're deporting more people, but also importing It's just like this total grift that's kind of like happening underneath our noses. And so also in 2022, a bill passed called the Countering the PRC Malign Influence Flood, which authorizes the State Department and USAID to spend $1.6 billion over 5 years to just basically make anti-China propaganda. Literally $1.6 billion to write shit about China. That is where your money has been spent in America. Just fucking making up bullshit. Okay? And this bill passes with an overwhelming majority of 351 to 36. So this is a very bipartisan fucking supported bill. It's not just Democrats. It's not just Republicans. Both of them fucking like are like, yeah, we need to just talk shit about China. And this is USAID as well, or part of USAID. So over his presidency, there's a significant increase in crimes, especially in liberal cities, as a result of these terrible, lax district attorneys that are installed by George Soros. For example, Chicago, the homicide rates increased, and people started to get sick of BLM. Right? They're like, well, yeah, Black lives do matter, but my life matters too. I don't want to get killed or robbed or whatever. And so we can't get rid of all police because like then criminals would just go run amok, which is, that's what happened in the past 4 years. And then the other thing was that during Biden's campaign, or Biden's presidency rather, more people actually died under COVID. And so under Trump's, he was dealing with it, and 400K died. Biden, he's already kind of got the vaccine rollout and all this stuff, but more people actually do die under Biden's presidency from COVID. And that's when they stopped recording the numbers. Like when, there are probably more people that actually died, but then they curiously stopped the count after a certain amount of people died. And so it's just kind of like, oh yeah, see, we stopped it, without actually stopping it. In 2021, Biden has withdrawal from Afghanistan. It's a much needed withdrawal, I will say. But he handles it terribly because like 13 troops die from the sloppiness of the pullout, and the Taliban retain control of the country within a week. So people are saying like your foreign policy is terrible, your domestic policy is terrible, right? But yeah, and then obviously we saw what happened with Ukraine and Israel. We're just sending them shit tons of money to kill children and to support Nazis, while at the same time natural disasters gathered very little response. There was the Louisiana hurricane in 2021. There was the Ohio train derailment, like I mentioned before, and the Maui fires in 2023. There was Hurricane Helene crushing households in North Carolina, Georgia, that area. And, with the Los Angeles fires, which we're seeing Karen Bass and their fucking Democratic goons kind of like actually trying to stop the federal government from trying to help. We're seeing the fucking same bullshit. Like the Democrats are literally giving money to Nazis while doing nothing. Like I think they give like $700 or something to each person who like lost their entire home. And it's just kind of like, it's almost like worse than not giving anything at all. It's just like a fucking kick in the teeth that basically says like, oh yeah, this is what you're worth. But the Ukrainian people, or rather the money we can get from Ukrainian investments and destabilizing Russia, that's worth more to us than your life. And so yeah, people are very upset about this, understandably. But then, of course, the Democrats, they mash the same racism button over and over again. Like, oh, you're just a racist because you support Trump. And people get sick of this. People are like, fuck you. Like, I was on the fuck you train from day one. It's not that I support either party. I understand that it is kind of just like a circle jerk of fascism. But I was very fucking like annoyed with the like I I'm going to talk about them a lot in the future. But yeah, so on the other on the other side of his presidency, Hollywood is also. So what happens with COVID though is Hollywood is heavily damaged because nobody can go to the fucking movies or whatever, and Disney is kind of like pushing their Disney Plus channel, but by doing so, they're trying to compete with Netflix, right? But their idea is like, we gotta we gotta fucking throw we have Marvel, we have Lucasfilm, we have Pixar, we have a lot of IP. So all we have to do, people eat this shit up. People eat up Pixar, people eat up Star Wars, people eat up fucking Marvel. Like we've seen in the past, we can just throw slop on the fucking wall, put all this DEI shit, writers and creators, and people will still watch it because they have to know the continuity of the whole thing to fucking watch the films. So this is their idea or their plan, I think, in 2020 or whatever, going post Endgame. But COVID starts to throw a wrench in their system because like now they're timing, a lot of the timing of these films that were supposed to happen is off. But then also the quality of these fucking films are terrible because, yeah, like, unfortunately, what happened is that they put up a lot of diverse talent, but for the longest time, diverse talent was not cultivated. So they kind of just threw people into the fire who didn't have the right skills. They don't have the right writing skills. They don't have the right acting skills. They don't have the right directing skills. So they put out just slop that sounds terrible. Like She-Hulk was terrible. Fucking that Miss Marvel. It's just like the writing was so bad that even like the audiences that were primed to like woke shit started to be like, what is this crap? So by 2023, actually, every woke DEI executive in Hollywood is fired. WB actually makes huge cuts because, like, they're all the studios are fucking losing their lunch to Netflix and all these digital platforms, and so they took a long hard look in the mirror and their financial statements, and they were like, fuck woke is broke. So like already 2023, that was also the year of the Harvard Supreme Court case that reversed the racist anti-Asian Harvard kind of policy about affirmative action. And yes, it was a racist anti-Asian policy. I don't care how you want to dress it up. Yes, it might have been beneficial for black people. Yes, it might have been beneficial for Hispanic people. But at the end of the day, it is a fucking racist policy against Asian Americans. That is 100% certain. You can look in the fucking case file. You can see all the data that explains it. It was fucking racist. And so, yeah. So they get rid of that. And so also, as a result of all this insane government spending on these wars and record defense budget, like year on year, like we're spending close to, I think it was like 900 billion a year on military last time I checked, maybe close to $1 trillion, right? And we are at 125% GDP debt, which has not been reached since I think World War II. When we were fighting the Nazis. Like, yeah, we're going to incur some debt by fighting this fucking Nazi force and the Japanese, obviously. And so inflation also skyrockets to levels not seen since the 1970s. I think 1981 was the last year where we saw like 9 point whatever percent or almost double-digit percent inflation. And so, yeah, we saw 9 point something percent inflation in 2022, I think, or 2022 or 2023, I believe. And so all these factors are being like, yeah, this is a fucking shitty ass presidency. Like, everyone's pissed off. And so in 2024, there's also news that comes out that during the 2020 election, all these tech companies were notified by the FBI to suppress information about Hunter Biden's laptop. So this is literal fucking fraud that happened in 2020 election, that they were using the FBI to fucking influence the election. This is fucking bullshit, right? And you know, this has come out from Meta and Twitter. They were pressured by the FBI to basically censor all the stuff about Hunter Biden's laptop, which ended up being fucking true. He's a fucking crack addict, probably a pedophile, and sexual. At the very least, he's a fucking, you know, drug addict, I guess, prostitute, hirer. You know, not the most, and a lot of the stuff about the Ukraine dealing, like the business dealings too. And so Biden's competency itself comes into question when he debates Donald Trump. He looks like a dotard. He literally looks like a dementia patient that we all suspected for the longest time. For what it's worth, I think I saw some stat where a third of all congressmen use some sort of dementia medication. So there you go. I don't think it's too out of the ordinary to suggest that Joseph Biden has dementia. And so, due to the uninspiring campaign and terrible policies, Trump won the presidency for the second time because they switched to Kamala Harris late in the fucking race, and she just, yeah, well, we saw that. He's the second president since Grover Cleveland to win 2 non-consecutive terms. So Grover Cleveland, I think in the 1870s, I believe, or 1870s, 1880s, was president. And then it was, I think it was Chester A. I forget. I think it was Chester, but I'm not 100% sure. It's either Garfield or something like that. Anyway, yeah, so he's the first person to kind of do non-consecutive terms, or second president. All right, so immediately after his inauguration, he ends government. He freezes all government funding to foreign entities for 90 days. So the purpose of this is to like freeze everything. We're not paying anyone right now, and we have to figure out where all of this money is going. So this is DOGE's kind of like domain. This Elon Musk's kind of like operation where he is looking at the books, looking at what we're spending money on, and kind of like trying to, as it's almost kind of like an audit. We're trying to audit the federal government. It's ostensibly what they're trying to do. And you know, on the other side too, so before all this happened, you know, the Harris campaign is calling Trump Mussolini and Hitler combined. And this also kind of like disillusioned people because they were like, well, I mean, Biden's kind of worse than the Trump term that we had. So I don't know what you're fucking talking about. So does that mean Biden's like even worse than Hitler? And so they also see the hypocrisy because they see the campaign in Israel. Obviously, they see them bombing children in Gaza. So a lot of people are just like fucking sick of the Democrats and sick of wokeism. And they're like, this is fucking bullshit. So Trump winning kind of was a signal. I don't think Trump caused the end of the woke era, but Trump was the signal that the woke era ended, to me, right? So then, like I said before, he does the 90-day freeze thing, and this actually is the thing that cuts USAID funding. And so it's revealed that there are many questionable programs that were funded by USAID. Okay, so there were like all these different kind of like cultural like programs in global South countries that we had no idea what was going on. Because USAID ostensibly is to help the economic development. It's to help people in these global South companies or countries to be like, hey, like we're trying to help you, like we're trying to help your infrastructure, we're trying to help your businesses, like make businesses and like, you know, help. Ostensibly, USAID is there to help countries that are poor to get on their feet, to like, you know, to become, you know, independent, right? Obviously, USAID is not for that, but that's what ostensibly, that's what it says it's for in 1961 with JFK and all that stuff. But we already know it's not about that. We already know it's about like propaganda and influencing other nations with what we want to say. So then, because like if you normalize what Americans think to the rest of the world, now you've created this standard of ethics and morality that they are already on board with because now you've installed it there. This is kind of like how imperialists used Christianity back in the day. It's just kind of like if you make them believe in this religion where we're presenting to them that like white Jesus, right? So that puts into their minds like, oh, these people are God or they're from God, And so that was basically what imperialists used for like hundreds of years. But now it's just kind of like, hey, this is new ideology. And if you want to be progressive, if you want to look like the cool American liberals who are, making all these cool Marvel movies and shit, whatever. If you want to be part of the cool club, you got to be woke. You got to know your woke moral ethics, whatever. So that was, I think, ostensibly the idea. Like if you spread this ideology to the rest of the world and they accept it, then you have this kind of like moral kind of leverage to use when you want to invade a country or you want to make it do whatever you want. So then after USAID is cut, immediately what happens is, remember that counter PRC malign influence fund? That gets cut immediately, right? So then China watchers immediately go on X and Twitter and say, oh shit, my checks, I've been fired, I've been whatever, like my job's because of Trump and like all this other stuff. These are motherfuckers who have been lying about China for like their entire fucking careers. I've been dealing with these motherfuckers since 2019. Most of them blocked me by now, but like they are fucking scum of the earth. And so I knew for a fact that USAID was fucking bullshit, from dealing with these motherfuckers for the longest time. But now we had definitive proof that was bullshit, because not only that happened, it's revealed that Politico, NY Times, New York Times, AP, Reuters, Internews, all got USAID money. USAID is not meant for domestic issues. USAID is meant for, we're trying to ostensibly help third world countries develop. US aid. We're aiding other countries. Okay, and then so in 2023, in the full year 2023, it's revealed that 43.79 billion is allotted towards USAID. Okay, and then some of the stranger line items were there was DEI initiatives in Serbia, which is predominantly Slavic white. That was interesting. And also 1.5 million for DEI in Saudi Arabia, which is very notorious for not being very DEI, especially with women. There was 25 million in Georgia for green transportation research. It didn't affect gas usage at all. So it was just like $25 million that was spent to research absolutely nothing that did nothing. So we're seeing a lot of kind of like waste in the system. But the other thing that was kind of crazy. All right. So then this is like what in the global south, this is what the USAID was spending money on. Okay. So in Guatemala, there was $2 million for sex changes and LGBT activism. In Colombia, there was $47K for a transgender opera. In Peru, there was $32K for a transgender comic book. Peru, a predominantly Catholic nation with a transgender comic book. I mean, there was a transgender health clinic in India. South Africa had trans women health clinics as well. Sri Lanka was given $7.9 million for quote-unquote non-binary journalism. Bangladesh was given $1 million for third gender census push. Jamaica was given $1.5 million for LGBT advocacy. Western Balkans was given $3.9 million for LGBT causes. Myanmar was given $45 million for DEI scholarships, which is really weird because I don't know how much you know about Myanmar. It used to be called Burma. But currently it is being ruled by a military junta, and it's very unstable, has been very unstable for the past few years. There's just been a civil war, 1 million people displaced in recent times. So I don't know who the fuck is getting these like DEI scholarships that even like has the stability to stay in one place to like learn anything. Because shit is not DEI friendly in Myanmar, that's for sure. There's the Caribbean, where there was $3.3 million for being LGBTQ. I don't know what that is. But yeah, so it's just like all these countries in the global south, most of them pretty Catholic or pretty Christian or pretty Muslim. They're trying to spend money to normalize this fucking LGBTQ stuff in countries where they don't want it. They literally do not want it. They believe in their religions much more than we do. That's for sure. Like we call ourselves Christians here or whatever, but what does that even mean anymore? Right? I'm seeing like even Republican commentators being like, yeah, what does that even mean anymore? Like Republicans aren't Christian either. So the mood obviously shifted as well. Most people in America, most people who aren't liberals, we're sick. We're sick and tired of woke ideology. We know it's bullshit. It peaked in 2021, I would say, and then it started to crack slowly as the inconsistencies and contradictions started to pile up. So this, I think the significant thing was, you know, the Democrats were trying to say, hey, we're progressive. But then as the stuff in Gaza and Israel started to come out, people were like, you talk all this time about police brutality and racist hate or whatever, and these people are literally being genocided because of their nationality and because they refuse to leave their homes. And you are saying that, you know, all this fucking talk about decolonization and all this fucking bullshit that they've been spewing at us for the past 10 years or whatever. And now it's just kind of like when you see them annihilating children for just being Palestinian, you're just kind of like, you guys are fucking full of shit. You guys are done. Like, I don't believe you anymore. Like, you know, I'm not talking about me and myself. I never believed them. But like, I'm talking like from the average person's perspective, Republican or Democrat, you're just kind of like, what are you talking about? Like, how? Because the other thing, too, is it was revealed that they actually had different, like the Democratic Party, they actually had different campaign notices for different states. That was the fucking kicker. That was like, these motherfuckers are fucking hypocrite bullshit. Obama fucking CIA ops. Because you know why? In Michigan, a predominantly Muslim area, they did all that fucking Palestine, Gaza stuff, whatever, because they knew, whatever. Fortunately, they didn't fall for it because most of them voted for Jill Stein instead of the Democratic Party. But they lost that state to Donald Trump, obviously, because of that. But in another state, you know, that was more Zionist friendly, of course, they're posting stuff about, like, you know, saving the hostages. So it's just kind of like, do they really think that we're that stupid to not put fucking 2 and 2 together and see this manipulation? I mean, there's definitely shit. I'm not saying there's bullshit going on right now with the Trump presidency, because there is bullshit. And I'm going to talk about that too at some point, especially with the Epstein stuff that's been coming out. But, you know, that's for another episode. But right now I am dealing with the fucking bullshit of the Democratic Party. And so, yeah, this is all fucking bullshit, right? We can tease out all these you can say you're progressive all you want, but the moment you fucking like have a double standard or lie about something, that is when people tune out. You've lost the fucking argument. You've lost them. And this is actually why I think the CIA actually allowed USAID to kind of crumble. I think they already knew that woke was dead too. And so it was almost like a queen's sacrifice to be like, hey, like, woke was bad. So in order to get ahead of it, they already like throw the fucking liberal or leftists on the bus, because they're like, well, we gotta move on and kind of like regain the narrative and make the people trust the federal government right now, make people trust Trump right now because he's in power. And so in order to do that, we do the queen sacrifice. We say like, yeah, USAID was bullshit. So I think that the CIA actually doesn't mind these revelations because they've already used them to their fullest capacity. It's kind of like I don't know. So when Peacock, so Universal, NBC Universal, they had a service, or they try to so Peacock is Universal's attempt at making a streaming service. And for the longest time, they were advertising with The Office, right? Like, oh, you get The Office plus this, you get The Office plus that. Like all these plans were like, you get The Office, or whatever. That was like their main selling point, because like they saw Disney with its IP, they thought The Office was on the same level as Marvel, Star, whatever. And they were like, hey, as long as we have The Office, people are going to come, because like we saw on Netflix, people were binging The Office. Like they're watching The Office all the time. But what they didn't realize is people already binged it. So why would they go to fucking Peacock to pay more money to binge something that they already binged? That's the same thing with the CIA and the USAID. I think it's just kind of like they understood they already binged this material, so this material doesn't work anymore. So we gotta now the idea is to give or lend credibility to Trump, so whatever he says is now going to be accepted by the American public. So that's what I think happened with that. Okay, so then some final thoughts. At the end of the day, behind all of this was Obama, who was the central figure, who was literally born from a USAID family. Like his mother was USAID, like literally in a USAID program. His stepfather, his real father were likely also CIA assets. His grandmother, and you could see from his president, even without the CIA context, you could see how it's almost kind of this like sociopathic machinations of like, what is going to make me appear more progressive? What is going to make me appear more good and virtuous to the rest of the voting electorate? And I think that the Republicans actually provided cover by using racist, and so what happened is, so he's promoting this woke stuff or whatever, or he's getting this woke stuff out there. But I think what happened is, in reaction, the Republicans kind of like walked into a trap where they accused them of being, the birther controversy or whatever, that now like it seems like they're just racist and idiots, right? And then they also do the Big Mike thing, where they say, oh yeah, Michelle Obama was actually a man, and stuff that's like so beyond the pale that it's just kind of like it makes, like, they have some of the same critiques about Obama, but like when they couch it in like, these stupid conspiracy theories about like Big Mike and fucking whatever, they actually paint the entire picture as being racist and transphobic and homophobic or whatever, right? So in a way, the Republicans actually provide cover for Obama by being so stupid and racist, because now every criticism against Obama is now racist or misogynist or transphobic, right? So they actually produce a woke shield for Obama by being, anti-woke. And that's what I think Obama planned too. I think he knew that they would react in this way, and he was playing that off them for his benefit. Because I said that they missed the forest. Like they do have legitimate suspicions about Obama, but they're pointed in the totally wrong areas, because, obviously they don't have the beneficiary lens of Marxism, Leninism, and dialectical materialism to analyze it, which I do. And so that's how they get it totally wrong. But at the end of the day, identity politics actually comes from Zionism. And the reason I say this is because it's kind of like the first time in human history where a group of people have effectively used a tragic incident against them as leverage for more benefits, more, an entire country, right? Entire country where you get free healthcare. That is your reward for going through the Holocaust, right? And that's totally financed by the American public. That's your reward. You go through a terrible thing, and you get a reward at the end for it. Doesn't matter where the reward is coming from, right? It's not Germany and France that gave their Alsace-Lorraine region to the Jewish people to create Israel there. No, it was other people who had to pay the price. But you still have to get paid, right? And it's the same thing in kind of like we're seeing in America here, where it's like black people feel, they talk about reparations all the time or whatever, and they do have a little bit of a case. I'm not going to say they don't, but they don't care where it comes from. They are content to attack Asian people, Hispanic people, or any other non-black person because they're not African descendants of slavery, right? And so if they get in their way, it's like, no, you are a colonizer too. Or you are a white supremacist too. And it's just kind of like, well, no, that's a little not nuanced at all. And you can't just call me a racist because I don't want to pay you money for a crime that I did not commit. Or, like in California, for example, it's just kind of like California was never a slave state. Black population's fairly low until the 1940s when they came during the second migration to provide labor for the military for the World War II. And it was actually more Chinese indentured servant labor that built the railroads that connected California to the rest of the country, and built a lot of San Francisco with the Irish. And they were soft genocided actually with the Chinese Exclusion Act and the Page Act. So if anyone should get reparations, it's people that were descendants of those Chinese railroad workers because they were literally fucked over by the state. Like in California, I don't know why we're talking about reparations when they came way after. Anyway, so that's kind of like Zionism is that idea. Like we deserve to be paid back. And it doesn't matter who pays it. It doesn't matter. So that is basically why people of color or people who are marginalized latch onto this thing because they see it as like, hey, if I join this thing, I'm gonna get reparations. Hey, if I join this thing, I'm gonna get a country. Hey, if I join this thing, I'm gonna, being trans is now like kind of like a unique status symbol a little bit. That's why I speculate that a lot of these people, a lot of these trans male to female, I'm noticing that a lot of them used to be right wing, like almost part of this Gamergate stuff. So I have a theory that a lot of these incels realize that in the current kind of like market, they're never going to get laid as men. So what they got to do is transition into women. So not only do they have access to women's spaces now, but it's almost like not acceptable to not accept them, right? So you see a lot of these people like terrorizing fucking like female only Korean spas in Seattle. Like they're literally fucking perverts. They're male to female trans women who did not actually transition their lower things, and not a lot of people know this, but Korean spas are fully nude, female. And so, yeah, they fought it in court because they wanted to protect their female clientele, and that's as they should, in my opinion. I don't like I'm a dude, and I don't want to fucking see dicks. Like, I don't want to go to a fucking naked spa. Like, if you're a woman, you don't fucking want to see that shit when you're in a spa. Like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, no. Like, this is fucking ridiculous. So that's why it's saying, like, this is like a way for these fucking incels to hack the system, being like, hey, if we become trans, not only do we get access to women's spaces, but we're now seen as like woke. We're now seen as progressive. We're actually protected now because the woke shield is letting us do whatever the fuck we want. So they hacked wokeism by transitioning. And it makes total fucking sense. Like, I don't have any numbers to prove this, but I've observed enough to see like streamers like Keffels or whatever, and other people she was associated that were likely Nazis before. And so, you know, that's kind of like where that theory comes from or whatever. So I know I've talked about it on Twitter before. And so when you zoom out, right, when you zoom all the way out and you take a look at Obama's presidency after the Bush presidency, what do you see, right? You after the Bush presidency, it's like 9/11 happens, and there's this terrible war in Iraq, and, you know, Afghanistan. It's all, you know, initially it seems like, yeah, but like, go Bush, like, we need to be defended. But like by the end, it's like, oh fuck, like, we killed a lot of children, and that's not cool. We did a lot of terrorism. So then it's just kind of like after 2008, when you put Obama's presidency after, it's like, oh, see, we're not that bad after all. See, we got Obama, we got a black president. Look how progressive America is now. You know, like, yeah, we might kill some children in the Middle East, but overall, we're trying our best, and we'll get there someday. And this woke stuff is going to help us get there. Like, all we need to do is just be woke, and problems will be solved. And so that was kind of like the idea back then, and it kind of worked. Where at the end of 2016, I don't know how many of you guys remember this, but like, yeah, I myself was like, the Democrats are crushing. Democrats are firing all cylinders. I could not even imagine a Republican winning against Clinton that year. So, like, kudos to them. It worked for me too. Like, I fell for the fucking propaganda as well. You know, I wasn't paying attention as much attention to it as I am now, of course, and that's probably why I fell for it. But, you know, like, if I'm falling for it, like, chances are, you know, most people are falling for this shit. And so it took the Trump presidency and the Biden presidency to really wake us up from all this fucking garbage. And then the Trump presidency again, right? So my actual theory is that Trump was just so anti-Obama that he was accidentally progressive. What I mean by that is, like, you know, all this stuff that Obama's doing, like even this Ukraine deal, you know, that was started by Obama, right? Remember the fucking 2014 war, Ukraine war, starts in 2014, and they're doing all this Russian collusion shit to make Trump seem like a fucking colluding with Russia or whatever. But then Trump is now ending that fucking engagement, right? He's made a deal with Putin, and he's actually said to the fucking Ukrainians, like, you better fucking stand down, or we're gonna we're gonna, like, you know, we're taking back what's ours. And so in a way, I see it as Trump merely reversing everything Obama did, which is like probably more vindictive than actually being progressive, but unintentionally, like, by reversing some of the stuff that he did, he's actually like more progressive than any president has been in the past. Basically, yeah, there is some teeth to his, like, you know, I remember when he said, like, I'm the most progressive president for black Americans since Abraham Lincoln. and maybe even more than Abraham Lincoln. Like at the time, I was like laughing, like this is fucking ridiculous. But at the end of the day, that might actually be true, like unintentionally. But yeah. So the other thing is, I'm not an idiot. Look, I don't think Trump is this progressive Leninist president that's communist and it's gonna change society forever. I already know that Trump and Elon, they're probably gearing for some other purpose for this money. The only reason, the only way I'll actually believe that they're legit is if they make significant cuts to the Department of Defense. If they don't do that, I think they're just full of shit. And we're kind of seeing that they're full of shit with the Epstein stuff that's coming on, but that's another fucking story. So throughout all of this, I'm kind of like already in 2020, 2021, I had a lot of these ideas in place. This is the first time I kind of like laying them out in this format. But throughout the time, I had this line for myself, basically, as a communist, right? I had one standard. As a communist in today's 21st century, who are the most exploited? It's not Americans. We live in the imperial core where we're an imperialist country. We're exploiting other nations for their resources and their labor, right? So the global south are the people who are the actual, like, real revolutionary subject overall in global communism, right? So then what do they care about? What are the things that the global south cares about? And I guess for me, when I thought about it that way, I was like, if they don't care about this issue, then I don't care about this issue. If they don't care about fucking trans issues or gay issues or whatever, I'm not going to care about them. As a politics thing, not as like I don't have empathy, I don't have whatever, but in a political context, if they don't care about this or even like oppose this, then I'm going to clock that and say that's not a communist ideal. And I think that test has pretty much led me on that right path of sussing all of this out, of seeing all this bullshit. Yeah, and I think the USAID revelations vindicated that standard, right? And I think like a lot of the stuff, we see that it's distasteful and offensive to a lot of working class Americans. And so even that concept becomes muddied, where like, who is the working class, right? Is it and the working class in the communist context are basically the people who, if they stopped working tomorrow collectively, our entire society would crumble into fucking chaos. That is the definition of like in terms of Marxist theory of like the working class. Like they are needed to keep society running in the American working class context. And so where do most of those people live? A lot of those people live in red states. And so I think that wokeism was created specifically to blur class designations and to create divisions along race, to create divisions along gender, to create divisions along sexuality, of course. These are just like lines that are being drawn to re-segregate us, not to integrate us. This is just like, oh, because I'm black, I deserve X reparations. So you are now putting yourself above the needs of another person, of another citizen. You're saying that because of my identity, I deserve special privileges. And so with this kind of thinking, now you've already painted these working class people as the enemy, right? Because they're cis white male dudes in Republican states. So they're already the enemy. And so what wokeism is just basically the split between the working class. And the reason I say that too is because the other thing about Martin Luther King and Malcolm X is that both were killed actually right before or right after, they started to become more inclusive. So most people know that Malcolm X was very militant, right? Like very like black separatist, almost like black nationalist. But when he went to Mecca, he saw people, worshiping together and all different races, like they were all Islamic and Muslims. And he saw that and he was inspired and he was like, oh, if people believe in the same ideology, they can fuck with each other. But it's really just like capitalism that's this, or imperialism that's like kind of like this cause. So he's doing that year in '64, going to Mecca, and then when he comes back, he's shot, ostensibly by the nation, some Nation of Islam members. But it's highly probable that the New York, NYPD or the FBI knew that that hit was going to happen, and they pulled police from that event, even though it was a well-known public speaking event that he was going to be in. He usually had at least NYPD people come to every event he went to. But curiously, they were not there that day. So that's with Malcolm X. And with Martin Luther King, literally a year before he died, he makes a speech about Vietnam in 1967 about how a threat, a threat to justice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere, right? So he's basically saying, I can't be consistent about like fighting for Black American rights here and say that I approve of what's going on in Vietnam because these people are just being killed by bombs, whatever. And if we have enough money to pay for all these bombs, why don't we have enough money to pay for homeless people or whatever? So during this, a lot of the Black community actually breaks with Martin Luther King. His approval rating goes down to 25%. The NAACP throws him to the fucking curb. Lyndon B. Johnson revokes his White House access, calls him the N-word. And so it was literally kind of this, just like they had canceled him. Like that's I guess like the most analogous way of saying it. But he kept going. He was in the middle in Washington, D.C. I think he was doing like a drive for working class people. It wasn't just Black Americans anymore. He was trying to fight for the rights of working class citizens like all over. But then, of course, he was killed literally a year after he gave the Vietnam speech. So I don't know if this is, a symbolic thing or whatever. But to me, it does feel a little fishy as well. And, there's a lot of controversies over his death. But the point of the matter is that both Malcolm X and MLK, who are painted as these like only Black liberation or Black identity figures, they were actually also like communist leaning or communist thinking as well. Malcolm X actually registers as a communist in 1950. He writes a letter to President Truman in jail protesting the Korean War. And that's actually what puts him on the FBI list all the way in 1950 when I think it was like 25. And so, yeah, they've been like the Black liberals have been working with white liberals since the civil rights movement to obfuscate a lot of this fucking shit. And that provided the fertile soil for this woke Frankenstein experiment, this Obama USAID experiment to succeed. And if Trump had never won, who knows? We might be, in this fucking woke matrix by now. But I'm glad things happen the way they do. But I'm saying also that there's still more work to be done. But I, for one, am glad that the woke era is over and we can start dissecting arguments more in the substance of the arguments rather than using identity politics ad hominems all the time. And so that's this long. So you can see why it took 2 weeks to make this fucking video, because I wanted to be complete as possible. I wanted to take my knowledge of the industry and kind of like pick out all the different factors of how this woke shit was Frankenstein together. And I think I did a pretty good job. I'll try to give some visual aids for this one. So hopefully it'll work. But yeah, so this is kind of like going to be the format of videos going forward. They're going to be kind of more like, longer essays that talk about stuff that I want to talk about. Like I generally, I consider doing the same kind of format as like, KTSC as I did before, whatever. Kind of like a current events thing. And, I might do something like that, like more of a shorter thing that just goes over my quick thoughts on like what's going on. But for this main thing, I want to get started first. I want to go deep into topics like this. And I think I have a lot of insight that not a lot of people have when I do go long form. Because I think short form, it can be clickbaity and catch your eye or whatever. But I think there's a lot that's missing that can be reinterpreted in certain ways. So I like to be complete. I like to be as complete as possible. I guess that's the German philosophy that I'm reading, maybe influencing me. But I like to see things in a complete system and to try to encapsulate everything that's happening, so I can kind of like zoom out and be like, this is what's fucking actually going on. So I hope you enjoyed, and let me know in the comments what you think of this format, and if what you like, if you want to see anything else, or if you liked it, or what I could do better. Unfortunately, it is long in the tooth. I'm not gonna lie. A 3-hour, I think, or plus episode where I am just talking. That is insane. But hopefully I kept it interesting enough. I'm going to add timestamps, of course. And catch you next time I record or make a thing. All right. See you.